I just can't live like this anymore. With a weary sigh, Rocky ran a hand through his hair, trying to push away the overwhelming weight of Thunderhawk City's struggles. The city was in ruins. Scarce resources, hunger, and desperation clung to the streets like an unshakable curse. As its city lord, he should have felt a sense of authority, of power. Instead, he felt shackled by responsibility, drowning in problems with no clear solutions. But there was one hope: mana runes. If he could master the art of inscribing mana runes and harness their potential, Thunderhawk City's fate could be rewritten. The limitless mana they provided could revolutionize the city's equipment, bolster its defenses, and turn scarcity into abundance. When Seer's research had emphasized this very concept, mana runes were the key to empowering people against the looming threat of demons. Yet, what when Seer had not lived to witness was the completion of a project he had only dreamed of: the creation of the Void Magic Armor. Unlike standard mana equipment, the Void Magic Armor was leagues beyond, a revolutionary force. And Rocky knew something that when Seer likely would have realized in an instant: mana runes and Void Magic Armor were a perfect match. By replacing the conventional magic stone inside the armor with a more refined and unrestricted mana rune, its combat capabilities would surge beyond anything currently known. It could even evolve. The mere thought sent a thrill through Rocky's veins. With mana runes, the struggles of Thunderhawk City would become nothing more than a memory. No more shortages, no more ill-equipped guards struggling to protect the weak. No more desperation. He clenched his fists, determination solidifying within him. If he wanted that future, he had to work for it. And that meant learning how to draw runes. Pushing aside his doubts, Rocky reached for a piece of equipment from the wooden crate beside him, a wrist guard. Then he grabbed his most important tool, the magic energy pen. Unlike an ordinary writing instrument, the magic energy pen was designed specifically for inscribing mana runes. It transformed magic power into ink, allowing the user to etch runes onto objects. Without this tool, true mana runes couldn't exist. Taking a steadying breath, Rocky channeled his magic and carefully began tracing a rune onto the surface of the wrist guard. The pattern he attempted was a first-level mana rune, a basic yet fundamental symbol that could sustain and regulate magical energy. It seemed simple in theory, but execution was another matter entirely. One mistake, one imperfection, and the entire rune would collapse. His hand trembled slightly. He told himself to stay calm, but the more he focused on precision, the harder it became to control. Then, a single slip, a tiny tremor. The rune he had painstakingly drawn faded into nothingness. Huff! Rocky exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from his forehead. Despite having barely begun, his body was already slick with perspiration. The process was more exhausting than he had anticipated. It wasn't just about memorization. It was about skill, control, and unwavering focus. Failure had been inevitable. He had expected it, but he refused to let it discourage him. With renewed determination, he lifted his pen and began again. One attempt, failure. A second, failure. A third, fourth, fifth, failure, failure, failure. The cycle repeated itself in an endless loop. Each failure chipped away at his patience, but he refused to stop. The research notes had made this seem easier than it was. They explained the technique, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of actually executing it. At one point, frustration made him double-check the notes, convinced he had misunderstood something. But no, his understanding was correct. The problem was simply that drawing a successful rune was incredibly difficult. Evening crept upon him before he realized it, and he finally stopped. Not because he wanted to, but because his magic power was completely drained. Mana runes required very little energy to draw, but his repeated failures had slowly siphoned away his reserves. He had nothing left to give. Yet, despite his exhaustion, a small smile tugged at his lips. He hadn't succeeded, but he had improved. He could now draw the rune in a single attempt, even if the details weren't yet perfect. And progress meant hope. Hope that one day, he would master this craft. Satisfied with his progress, he decided to call it a night. Tomorrow he would try again, but first he needed rest. His mana needed time to recover. As he left his study, he was surprised to find Lilia standing at the doorway, arms crossed. Lilia, he blinked. Have you been waiting here the whole time? Not waiting. Protecting, she corrected matter-of-factly. Even as the captain of the Guard Corps, I'm still your protector. Rocky felt warmth spread through him at her words. He wasn't alone in his struggle. You've worked hard, he said, his voice softer than usual. She studied him, eyes sharp. You don't look great. I just ran out of magic power. That's all. He waved a hand dismissively. Lilia nodded, her expression unreadable. That's a good thing. Constant use of magic refines your control. If you keep this up, you might become a level 2 mage soon. Rocky groaned. Spare me the lectures. I just want food. His stomach growled, making his priorities clear. He had been so engrossed in his training that he hadn't eaten all day. Now that the exhaustion had caught up to him, hunger gnawed at his insides. Dinner is in your room, Lilia informed him, her voice laced with quiet amusement. I had someone bring it earlier. You're the best. Rocky grinned, giving her a thumbs up before rushing toward his room. Lilia watched him go, letting out a quiet sigh. The best, she murmured. Her gaze lingered on the doorway he had disappeared through, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. It's only because you're someone who needs taken care of. For the next half-month, Rocky dedicated himself to a single pursuit, drawing mana runes. On one hand, he had no choice. Thunderhawk City's dire circumstances demanded that he master mana runes as quickly as possible. They were his only hope for turning the tide. On the other hand, he found an unexpected joy in the process. Though failures were frequent, each one was a lesson, revealing mistakes and guiding him toward improvement. What should have been a monotonous, frustrating routine instead became an engaging challenge, one that he relished. Failure after failure, he never lost patience. If anything, the setbacks fueled his obsession, driving him deeper into his work. He found himself absorbed, almost possessed, by the desire to perfect his craft. Fortunately, the city remained relatively calm during this time, allowing Rocky to remain secluded in his laboratory without interference. Each day passed in quiet progression, the air deceptively tranquil. But Rocky, Lilia, and Aileen knew the peace was fleeting. The real storm was just beyond the horizon. The Azure Commerce Guild was coming. Their arrival would trigger a crisis, one that threatened to cripple Thunderhawk City. The price of yarn, a critical resource, would skyrocket, setting off a chain reaction that could collapse the fragile economy. Everyone was scrambling for a solution, from Rocky himself to Aileen, who was taking an increasingly active role. Grandpa, the Azure Commerce Guild's merchant ships will be here in a few days. Have you made contact with them? Aileen sat at home, her anxiety evident as she questioned her grandfather, Voss. Since her last meeting with Rocky, she had been busy. She had informed Voss of Rocky's plan to sell private assets to stabilize the city's finances and urged him to negotiate with the guild on their behalf. Without realizing it, Aileen had firmly aligned herself with Rocky's cause. Voss, however, had noticed. Seeing his granddaughter so invested in the city's fate had taken him by surprise, but he hadn't hesitated to act. He had reached out to the Azure Commerce Guild a week prior. Now, faced with Aileen's worried expression, he offered her a wry smile. What? Are you doubting your old grandfather's abilities now? Of course not. Aileen pouted, her usual composure slipping in front of him. Chuckling, Voss reassured her, I've spoken with Chief Steward March. He's open to negotiations, but the details must be settled in person. So don't worry. Aileen let out a relieved sigh, a smile breaking through her tension. Grandpa, you're amazing. Chief Steward Mar handled the Azure Commerce Guild's trade with Thunderhawk City, and Aileen knew that he and Voss had a long-standing connection. If Mar was willing to negotiate, there was hope of mitigating the crisis. If they could prevent yarn prices from rising too sharply and sell magic stones at a premium when buyers arrived, they could buy Thunderhawk City valuable time. Reassured, Aileen began strategizing her next steps. Meanwhile, Rocky continued his relentless practice. Days turned into weeks. By now, he had spent nearly a month buried in his work, a feat that even Lilia found impressive. What a grueling month it had been. Repetition, failure, and more failure. Yet Rocky never wavered. The patience and resilience required were extraordinary, and any ordinary person would have long given up. But Rocky pressed on, and finally, after countless failures, his persistence bore fruit. One moment, he was simply going through the motions, drawing yet another rune on his wrist guard. The next, success. The rune remained intact, its magic stabilizing before his eyes. Did I just succeed? Rocky murmured, staring at the wrist guard in disbelief. He couldn't feel any difference between this attempt and the previous ones, yet the rune held. You actually did it? Lilia's excited voice rang out, far more elated than Rocky himself. He turned to her, then back to the rune, a slow smile creeping onto his face. It had come together naturally. After relentless practice, Rocky had instinctively mastered the first-level mana rune. It may have seemed like just another step, but this was monumental. Not only was it the first rune he had ever successfully inscribed, but it was also the first mana rune to be successfully depicted since the dawn of the Sky era. Although only Lilia witnessed the moment, it was still historic. From this point forward, the world would change. Congratulations, Lilia said sincerely, looking at him with pride. She had watched him struggle, fail, and persevere for nearly a month. More than anyone, she understood what it had taken to reach this point. Rocky merely smiled. He knew that Lilia's presence had been a quiet but constant support. She hadn't helped with the runes themselves, but she had kept him grounded, ensuring he never felt alone. On impulse, he pulled her into a hug. Ah! Lilia let out a surprised gasp, stiffening at the unexpected contact. Rocky, however, simply held her, savoring the moment. The faint scent of her hair, the warmth of her presence, strong yet delicate. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like eternity. How long do you plan to keep holding me? Lilia finally asked, amusement creeping into her tone. Rocky smirked, resting his chin lightly against her shoulder. A little longer. Lilia chuckled and gently pushed him away. I think that's enough. Stepping back, she studied him. Now that you can inscribe runes, what's next? Are they really as useful as you hope?
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Rocky finally succeeded in drawing the rune, and even though it was only a first-level rune, it was still a cause for joy, so much so that even Lilia couldn't help but feel happy for him. But even though the rune drawing was successful, what next? Rocky was now able to make runes, but what did that represent? Could it mean that from now on, he and Thunderhawk City could soar to great heights and transform from a sparrow into a phoenix? Lilia didn't think so, which was why she couldn't help but ask. However, Rocky obviously had a plan in mind, so he immediately gave his answer. I plan to produce a batch of rune equipment. Produce rune equipment? Upon hearing this answer, Lilia frowned. Are you planning to start trading rune equipment? Rocky, you absolutely cannot do this. Before Rocky could speak, Lilia interrupted him and said very seriously, Rocky, you absolutely cannot sell rune equipment before you have the power to protect yourself. And you can't even let others know about it. Mana runes are too important enough to change the entire structure of the skies. If others come to know that you possess such terrifying technology, it would be a disaster for us. Lilia looked at Rocky seriously and expressed the concerns that she had harbored for a long time. Even though Lilia didn't know much about mana runes, she was not a fool. She had understood how terrifying they could be just by a rough understanding of the potential applications of the runes. If outsiders were to learn that Rocky had such important technology, the outcome would not be beneficial for Thunderhawk City or him. Instead, it would bring disaster upon them. A disaster so severe that it could leave him and Thunderhawk City with nowhere to bury their dead. Thus, as soon as Rocky was able to draw runes, Lilia spoke out her concerns, truly afraid that Rocky might not realize this. Don't worry, I've thought about all of this already. Lilia was right to be worried, but she underestimated Rocky. All the possibilities she mentioned had already been considered by Rocky. No one understood better than Rocky how important mana runes were and how they could change the world. The moment the mana runes were exposed, he and Thunderhawk City would become targets. Those behemoths roaming the skies, those true leviathans, would immediately come after him, and they would stop at nothing for mana runes. This was a case of the innocent man burdens himself with the guilt of his jade treasure. Mana runes were the jade treasure, and Rocky was the man burdened with it. Almost all those he faced harbored malicious intentions toward the mana runes. Given such circumstances, how could he possibly be foolish enough to expose the mana runes so soon? The mana runes might eventually become known to the world, but it definitely wasn't the time yet. Rocky's intention to produce a batch of rune equipment was actually part of a different plan. After Rocky explained simply, Lilia's worries dissipated. In fact, no matter what Rocky intended to do, she would support him in everything except for watching him head towards self-destruction. By the way, Aileen came by earlier. She wanted me to tell you that people from the Azure Commerce Guild will arrive tomorrow, but she said you shouldn't worry too much. Voss has already spoken with the Azure Commerce Guild, and from the hints they've dropped, it seems that the matter regarding the price increase of the thread is negotiable. Having finished talking about the mana runes, Lilia remembered the main matter at hand and hurriedly conveyed Eileen's words to Rocky. Aileen had visited earlier that day, but at the time Rocky was engrossed in studying mana runes, so Lilia turned her away. Nevertheless, she conveyed Eileen's message to Rocky without omitting a single word. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Upon hearing this, a look of joy spread across Rocky's face, even greater than the joy of successfully drawing the mana rune. The issue of the yarn price hike was what truly concerned Rocky and gave him a headache. It was not only imminent, but any mishandling could lead to great chaos. Did Aileen say that Voss has already notified the Azure Commerce Guild? Yes, that's what she said. That's such a relief. After asking Lilia once more and receiving a positive response, Rocky finally breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the price of yarn could be controlled, even if it was bound to rise, if the increase could be kept to a minimum, the pressure on Thunderhawk City would be significantly reduced and future matters would be much easier to handle. Let's go. We need to prepare. Aileen has already taken care of what she can, and we cannot afford any hitches on our part tomorrow. Having said this, Rocky left the study with Lilia to prepare for the next day's meeting with the chief steward of the Azure Commerce Guild. A day passed by quickly, and soon it was the next morning. Grandpa, the merchant ship has arrived. The next morning, to welcome the Azure Commerce Guild skyship, Aileen and Voss made a special trip to the port of Thunderhawk City. In theory, there was no need for such formality, but this time, Thunderhawk City was the one asking for favors. So not only did Aileen, the finance officer, come, but Voss was there too, showing utmost respect. At that moment, Aileen and her grandfather stood next to a carriage, looking in the same direction, when they saw a huge skyship entering Thunderhawk City's defensive net and slowly approaching the port for landing. Don't worry. Just perform normally and you'll be more than capable of handling it. As the skyship gently descended, Voss noticed that Aileen was a bit nervous and spoke to comfort her. Yes, since Grandpa has arranged everything, I won't mess it up. With a deep breath, Aileen nodded and then calmed herself down. Since Voss had previously greeted Chief Steward Mar, who was in charge of the trade, the negotiations with the Chamber of Commerce would be assisted by Aileen alongside Rocky, and Voss was not going to be involved. This fact had made Aileen somewhat nervous. However, since Grandpa had already made arrangements, Aileen felt that if she still couldn't handle the matter well, it would be rather incompetent of her. So she quickly let go of her undue anxiety, and confidence began to emerge in her eyes. Soon after, the merchant ship landed smoothly at the port, and in no time, a group of people disembarked and headed straight toward the carriage where Aileen and Voss were. These were the people from the Azure Commerce Guild. Grandpa, what's going on? Yet, as the people from the Azure Commerce Guild gradually approached, Aileen, who had stopped being nervous and was even full of confidence, suddenly panicked. Because upon seeing these people, she realized that the person leading them was not Chief Steward Mar, who had always dealt with the transactions with Thunderhawk City, but a middle-aged man she didn't recognize. What was happening? Hadn't Grandpa already liaised with Chief Steward Mar? Wasn't it agreed to discuss the details after they met? Why was it not Chief Steward Mar who came this time? This was bad. Taken by surprise, Aileen quickly looked at Voss, but found that he still wore a faint smile, as if none of this was unexpected to him. The sudden turn of events caught Aileen, who had made meticulous preparations, completely off guard. She had assumed that Chief Steward Mar would be the one coming, and had prepared thoroughly for that. Not only did Chief Steward Mar have a good relationship with her grandfather, but he had also hinted beforehand that although the price of yarn was bound to rise, the extent of the increase was negotiable. Isn't the implication clear? Simply put, as long as one can offer enough benefits, Chief Steward Mar could use his positional advantage to give Thunderhawk City a little price concession. As someone in charge of trading with the city, he certainly had that authority. Thus, Aileen had already figured out how to deal with Chief Steward Mar and had even notified Rocky in advance. But what was happening now? Why hadn't Chief Steward Mar, who had readily agreed with her grandfather, shown up? And why had someone else come to trade with Thunderhawk City? This unexpected change left Aileen at a loss, even uncertain about how to respond for a moment. Fortunately, Voss was right by her side. Is it Senior Voss? The group from the Azure Commerce Guild had just approached when their leader spoke up first. Indeed, may I know who I have the pleasure of speaking with? I am Jia Shi, the newly appointed overseer of the Azure Commerce Guild. The man speaking was named Jia Shi, who appeared to be around 40 years old, but his temples were already slightly graying, and his complexion didn't look very good. However, he maintained a smiling face throughout the conversation. Senior Voss, I have heard much about your exploits from Chief Steward March. You were quite an influential figure back in the day. After a brief self-introduction, the new overseer Jia, she struck up a conversation with Voss, who effortlessly responded with wit and humor. Judging by their demeanor at that moment, one couldn't tell that it was their first meeting. Instead, they seemed like old friends. After exchanging pleasantries, Voss, Jia Shi, and a perplexed Aileen all boarded the same carriage and headed straight for the City Lord's mansion. Senior Voss, please put in good words for us during this transaction in front of the City Lord. While riding in the carriage to the City Lord's mansion, Jia Shi and Voss talked continuously, quickly getting onto the topic of the transaction. But hearing this, Voss just smiled and shook his head, saying, Overseer Jia Shi, I'm afraid I can't interfere this time. I'm no longer the finance officer of Thunderhawk City. Oh, n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Upon hearing this, Joshi was startled, clearly unaware of this fact, then inquired, Senior Voss, who is Thunderhawk City's current finance officer? While speaking, Voss glanced at Aileen. Aileen, come and greet Overseer Joshi. Overseer Joshi, hello. Called upon by Voss, Aileen finally snapped back to reality and hastily greeted Joshi. In fact, from the very beginning, Aileen had been somewhat distracted. She kept wondering why. Why had the person coming to trade with Thunderhawk City suddenly changed? Was it an accident? Aileen didn't think so. At the critical juncture of rising yarn prices, such an accident seemed improbable. Was it a coincidence? Was it just a coincidence that the Azure Commerce Guild decided to have Jia Shi handle the trade with Thunderhawk City, and that it was completely unrelated to the increased price of yarn? Aileen felt that was equally impossible. Thunderhawk City might be small, but it was still a sky city, and it had to be managed by an overseer-level individual. Therefore, the Azure Commerce Guild wouldn't change its representative lightly. Furthermore, Chief Steward Mar had already made contact with Grandfather before. If he knew he was going to be replaced, why would he have readily agreed to all of Grandfather's requests? Therefore, after much thought, Aileen could only come to one conclusion. Grandfather had been deceived. Even though Chief Steward Mar had readily agreed to Grandfather's request before, in reality, it was all a deception. The other party likely knew in advance that it wasn't him coming to Thunderhawk City for the trade, but he didn't inform Grandfather, leading to today's scene. This outcome was indeed difficult for Aileen to accept. She had never imagined that her grandfather, who had always been so astute, would be tripped up over such a matter and played by a mere steward. With this in mind, she couldn't help but glance at Voss, only to find her grandfather looking as composed as ever, still jovially chatting with Jiaxi. At this moment, Voss was introducing Aileen to Jiaxi. "This is my granddaughter, and she is now the finance officer of Thunderhawk City." "Oh!" Voss's words made Jiaxi reveal an expression of sudden realization, and then he turned to look at Aileen. After examining Aileen, Jiaxi nodded with a smile. Although he didn't say much, there was an involuntary flash of something in his gaze. At the same time, Aileen subconsciously frowned because the thing that flashed through Jiaxi's eyes while appraising her suddenly made her feel somewhat disgusted. However, everyone present was clever. The sly and crafty Jiaxi soon started chatting with Voss again, and Aileen returned to her normal demeanor. During the journey, Jiaxi and Voss were always chatting idly, looking very much like longtime acquaintances. After learning that all the previous preparations had been void, Aileen began trying her best to join in the conversation, attempting several times to steer it towards the yarn trade. She wanted to use this opportunity to sound out Jiaxi's stance, to better prepare for the negotiations to come. But for some reason, after discovering that Voss was not the finance officer, Jiaxi, who had originally brought up the matter actively, now refused to discuss it. Even when Aileen brought it up several times on her own, he only casually acknowledged her a few times before changing the subject to other matters. The journey from the port to the city lord's mansion was not short, but it had to end eventually. So by the time the carriage stopped, Aileen's efforts had been unsuccessful. She hadn't been able to discern Jiaxi's stance. This result made Aileen more and more uneasy, because based on her experience, Jiaxi's behavior was not a good sign. And after the carriage arrived at the city lord's mansion, Aileen led Jiaxi to meet Rocky, while Voss, just as he had said earlier, did not follow. "City Lord, this is the overseer of the Azure Commerce Guild, Overseer Jiaxi." Having brought Jiaxi to the City Lord's Hall, Aileen was greeted by Rocky, who had already been waiting there for some time. However, when Aileen finished introducing Jiaxi and then looked towards Rocky, she discovered, just as she had imagined, that Rocky's face was filled with surprise and confusion. Clearly, Rocky had been just as baffled by Jiaxi's appearance as Aileen had been, because like Aileen, he had expected Chief Steward Mar to arrive, as Chief Steward Mar had represented the Azure Commerce Guild in dealings with Thunderhawk City for a long time. So, why was there suddenly someone else today? Now this was troublesome. Glancing at Jiaxi standing in front of him, and then at Aileen, whose expression was slightly embarrassed, Rocky knew that there might have been some changes in the situation. But his response was also quite fast. The surprise and confusion on his face quickly disappeared, replaced instead by a smile as he said to Overseer Jiaxi, "Overseer Jiaxi, you've had a long journey. Thank you for your kind concern, City Lord." With a slight bow to Rocky, Jiaxi clearly was a man accustomed to significant events and knew very well how to behave in the presence of a city lord. After that, Rocky exchanged a few pleasantries with Jiaxi, and then they moved on to the main topic. "City Lord, the price of yarn this time will increase by 30%. The real business between Jiaxi and Rocky was, of course, the yarn trade, and Jiaxi got straight to the point, informing Rocky that not only would the price of yarn go up, but it would be by as much as 30%. 30%! At these words, Rocky involuntarily took a sharp breath. The increase was not just far beyond his expectations. It even exceeded the limit that Thunderhawk City could withstand. The price of yarn is going to increase by 30%? Even though Rocky had known about this, when he heard about the 30% increase, he still involuntarily gasped, because this increase not only far exceeded his expectation, but also directly surpassed Thunderhawk City's limit of affordability. Such a significant price hike disrupted his original plan. According to his initial idea, he hoped to sell all the medium magic stones that had been found in the Research Institute, then use that income to offset the yarn price increase, maintaining the quarterly balance of income and expenditure. Based on Rocky's rough estimate, if he sold all the magic stones he had, he could earn at least 2,000 gold coins. Thunderhawk City's expenditure on yarn each quarter was around 20,000 gold coins, which means that even if the price of yarn increased by a full 10%, he he could still balance it out with the income from selling the magic stones, thereby relieving some of the financial pressure on Thunderhawk City. However, he never expected that the Azure Commerce Guild would actually raise the price of yarn by as much as 30% in one go. This meant that instead of spending 20,000 gold coins on yarn, Thunderhawk City would now need to spend 26,000 gold coins. An extra 6,000 gold coins. Such a large sum of money, let alone selling a few magic stones. Even if Rocky himself was sold, it wouldn't be enough to cover the cost. So after Overseer Jia finished speaking, Rocky couldn't help but frown, and his expression became increasingly grim. Overseer Jia, why has the price of yarn increased by so much? As Rocky's brows were tightly knitted, Aileen, who had brought Jia and was standing beside him, opened her mouth to speak. Eileen's role was that of the finance officer of Thunderhawk City, and it was indeed her responsibility to handle negotiations with the Chamber of Commerce. City Lord, in this matter, our Chamber of Commerce is also compelled, replied Jia, glancing at Aileen and wearing an innocent expression before turning to Rocky. City Lord, you may have heard that Songlong City is at war, and all resources in the city are being controlled. Frankly, to ensure the timely delivery of yarn, our Chamber of Commerce had to exert great effort within Songlong City. So, City Lord, this price really isn't within our control. In the face of Rocky, Jia presented an innocent facade. However, upon closer examination, his words seemed to hold some merit, yet were ultimately nonsensical. It was true that Songlong City was at war, but even if war necessitated the control of resources, it was unlikely to extend to yarn, which was not a strategic material. Moreover, the Azure Commerce Guild was not merely ordinary citizens. It was a chamber of commerce. Could it be that they would stop doing business simply because the war was occurring in the city where their headquarters were located? That, undoubtedly, was even less plausible. So while the war might indeed have caused an increase in the price of yarn, the increase could surely not be so substantial. In essence, the Azure Commerce Guild was using the war as an excuse to intentionally hike the prices. This fact was something Aileen understood all too well. Thus she spoke again. Overseer Jia, we're aware of the war in Songlong City, but this price is too high for us to accept. Miss Aileen, this is not something our Chamber of Commerce can decide. We truly have no choice. Following that, a verbal duel ensued between Aileen and Jia as they debated nonstop about the extent of the price increase. In the meantime, Rocky remained silent, quietly seated in the City Lord's position, clearly becoming an observer. As the City Lord of Thunderhawk City, haggling was not his job. He only needed to wait for Aileen to reach a conclusion with Jia and then give a nod or a shake of his head. Throughout the process of observation, Rocky gained a deeper impression of Aileen. The seemingly 17 or 18-year-old girl made him have to secretly give her a thumbs up. Despite Eileen's young age, she was not at all timid during negotiations, demonstrating considerable skill. She wisely avoided wasting time on whether the price should increase at all, instead bargaining over the amount of the increase. Based on Jia's demeanor, it was apparent that the Azure Commerce Guild was set on raising the yarn prices. Therefore, Aileen focused on negotiating the extent of the increase, with the goal of reducing it as much as possible. Clearly, she had a concise and clear objective for the negotiation. However, Eileen's adversary was no easy opponent. Jia was an extremely cunning merchant with impeccable negotiation skills, and he held fast to one crucial point. The Azure Commerce Guild, between itself and Thunderhawk City, was the stronger party, and Thunderhawk City had to purchase yarn and food from them. It was precisely because he held on to this key point that, no matter how hard Aileen tried, Jia wouldn't budge an inch. Overseer Jia, a 5% increase in the price of yarn is the absolute limit we can accept, said Aileen, her brows furrowed as she looked at Jia, stating Thunderhawk City's bottom line. Although that's what she claimed, she wasn't telling the whole truth. For as much as she knew, Rocky's acceptable bottom line was 10%. This meant that she was still leaving room for further negotiation with Jia. This is the art of negotiation. It's not about arguing, but about giving. You give me a step, I give you one, and only then is there something to talk about. Aileen clearly understood this principle. Unfortunately, after she finished speaking, Joshi simply shook his head. City Lord, Miss Aileen, raising the price of yarn by 30% is already the bottom line for our Chamber of Commerce. I truly have no leeway. Overseer Joshi. Joshi's attitude had finally pushed Aileen to her limit. She couldn't believe the other party was so stubbornly refusing to budge, clearly showing no desire to negotiate. All right. NOVL B //JNN. Just as Aileen was about to speak again, Rocky, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke up. He glanced at Aileen, signaling her to stop, and then turned his gaze to Joshi. Overseer Joshi, you must be weary from your journey. Let's end today's discussions here. After saying this, Rocky spoke to Aileen. Aileen, escort Overseer Joshi to rest, and do not neglect your duties. Yes. With a response, Aileen left the City Lord's Hall with Joshi. Watching the two leave, Rocky waited until the doors of the City Lord's Hall were closed before he sighed. He had purposefully halted the negotiation because he had realized that facing the unyielding Joshi, Aileen was at a loss. So he let Joshi rest, thus giving Aileen time to regroup and think about how to handle her opponent. However, Rocky was well aware that even if Aileen thought of a strategy, she might not come up with anything effective. The reasoning was simple. Thunderhawk City simply didn't have enough bargaining chips. Even a clever cook can't prepare a meal without rice. No matter how skilled Aileen was at negotiating, without sufficient leverage, she would never get Joshi to give in. And Joshi knew this, which was exactly why he was so uncompromising. This was the dilemma Thunderhawk City now faced. In such a situation, Rocky felt that he should start making other plans. Overseer Joshi, is there really no room for discussion on this matter? On the way to see Joshi out of the City Lord's mansion, Aileen was still trying, but this time she was less aggressive and seemed more like she was just chatting with Joshi. Overseer Joshi, as you know, Thunderhawk City isn't large, and with the price of silk skyrocketing so much, I'm afraid the City Lord won't accept it. So please, would you speak kindly of us to the Chamber of Commerce? If you could really come to an agreement, the City Lord would surely not treat you unfairly. Now that they were in private, Aileen spoke of matters that could only be discussed behind closed doors, such as personal benefits. However, hearing her words, Joshi just shook his head and smiled. Miss Aileen, just have the carriage take me back to the port. I'm accustomed to staying on the merchant ships. He looked at Aileen without any intention of acknowledging her suggestions. Well then, Joshi's reaction made Aileen frown. Could it be that Joshi really had no personal desires? Or was it that he had other plans? Or simply wanted more from playing hard to get? Uncertain of Joshi's intentions, Aileen chose not to say more and proceeded to escort him out of the City Lord's mansion. It was only upon leaving the City Lord, just as Joshi was about to board the carriage, that he suddenly turned to Aileen and said, Miss Aileen, if you... He caught Aileen's hand mid-sentence, gently stroking the back of her hand while he continued. If you really want to talk, you can come to the merchant ship for a detailed discussion. Overseer Joshi, please conduct yourself with dignity. Joshi's move caught Aileen off guard, and she immediately pulled her hand back from his grasp like a startled rabbit, glaring furiously at Joshi. Overseer Joshi, what are you intending to do? Staring fiercely at Joshi, Aileen was so angry she was on the verge of tears. She had never encountered such a situation before. But facing her angry stare, Joshi appeared completely indifferent, saying as he got into the carriage, Miss Aileen, the price of silk is negotiable. Whenever you are ready, you can come and find me. With those words, he closed the carriage door and rode away. What happened with Aileen after Joshi left, Rocky did not know, as he had returned to the laboratory after the two had departed. Although he hadn't lost hope in the negotiations, Rocky knew he couldn't solely rely on them. He needed a backup plan, which naturally involved the mana rune. So, after returning to the laboratory, he had Lilia bring over his void magic armor. Do you really intend to do this? Isn't it too soon? Not long after waiting in the laboratory, Lilia brought over the void magic armor, albeit somewhat reluctantly when handing it over to Rocky. because Rocky had already told her what he intended to do. He was planning to inscribe runes on the void magic armor. This decision surprised Lilia, as Rocky had only just learned about runes. Though using runes on the void magic armor was an inevitable trend, wasn't it too soon for Rocky to proceed? Especially considering he only had this set of void magic armor. And if anything went wrong, there was nowhere to turn. I just want to experiment, and besides, even if the runes fail, there are no side effects. It will merely consume some magic power. The void magic armor will definitely be safe. Though he spoke in such a manner, Rocky had no confidence inside, yet he had to proceed. How important the void magic armor was to him, Rocky knew better than anyone. It had always been his prized possession. How could he not cherish it? Unfortunately, due to the circumstances, he had no choice but to risk using the void magic armor. His only asset now was the mana rune, but given Thunderhawk City's current strength, he couldn't let outsiders know about the existence of runes. Thus, Rocky's options were limited, leaving him essentially with one choice: to use the runes to enhance his own strength. Either he would apply the runes to ordinary equipment, turning it into rune equipment, or he would apply them to the void magic armor to make it even stronger. And for Rocky, who already possessed the void magic armor, he naturally chose to apply the runes there. It wouldn't make sense to forsake the more powerful void magic armor in favor of wearing rune equipment, so he had to take this risk. However, Lilia found Rocky's decision not only rash but also pointless. In her view, even if Rocky became stronger, what use would it be? Nevertheless, she could see that Rocky seemed to have his own plans, so she ultimately did not stop him and even left the laboratory for fear of disturbing his rune drawing. Afterward, the laboratory was left with only Rocky, a pen, and a set of void magic armor. Placing the chess piece of the void magic armor on the lab table, Rocky did not immediately start inscribing runes on it, but carefully studied it inside and out. The reason why the void magic armor was considered the strongest personal equipment was not merely because it was embedded with magic stones. The technology contained within a set of void magic armor far exceeded the imagination. Therefore, even if Rocky had mastered the first level mana rune, he couldn't simply apply runes to the armor. If he wanted to use runes to strengthen the void magic armor, he first needed to understand the armor's mana driving system, then connect this system with the runes so that the armor could utilize the mana provided by the runes. The technology and expertise involved were so complex and advanced that unless one was a professional armor maker, no one could understand it, let alone Rocky. But despite the difficulty, he still planned to give it a try. It wasn't that he was overestimating his capabilities, but because he had a different idea. Rocky didn't want to drastically overhaul the void magic armor. He knew he didn't have the capacity to do so. Not just him, even the most experienced armor maker couldn't, especially since mana runes were a new technology. Without going through research and experimentation, no one could replace the magic stones in the void magic armor directly with runes. The involved technology was too numerous and complex. So his real idea was to treat the void magic armor like ordinary equipment and then turn it into rune equipment. Simply put, he wanted to inscribe runes on the void magic armor. By ensuring the original combat capabilities remained unchanged, he aimed to add a layer of rune equipment's power, using this method to indirectly strengthen the armor. This was a plan only Rocky could think of. No, it was a new idea that only he could conceive of. Before the advent of mana runes, whether it was void magic armor or magic energy equipment, both relied on magic stones to provide mana, making it impossible for a piece of equipment to be both void magic armor and magic energy equipment at the same time. They couldn't coexist. But now with the emergence of mana runes, which could substitute for magic stones and coexist with them, Rocky thought of this method to strengthen his own void magic armor, aiming to let his void magic armor maintain its original power while also becoming a set of rune equipment. This idea perfectly circumvented the high-end technology involved with the void magic armor, requiring only that the armor be treated as regular equipment, which could then be made into rune equipment. Though creating rune equipment wasn't a simple task, do not forget that Rocky still had a research notebook in his hands. Wenzel initially developed mana runes hoping they could replace magic stones and thereby transform mana equipment into rune equipment, significantly enhancing its power. Thus, his notes contained detailed instructions on how to use runes to make equipment. With this notebook, Rocky could fully create rune equipment, and if he succeeded, the enhanced void magic armor would undoubtedly see an upgrade in combat effectiveness. Then he could proceed with the next steps in his plan. Let's begin. After observing the chest plate of the void magic armor set for a long time, Rocky was ready to begin. He picked up the magic energy pin and drew a rune on the inner lining of the chest plate. Not wanting anyone to notice anything suspicious, he fully utilized the convenience of the runes, drawing directly on the inner lining of the armor. This method would not affect the rune's effectiveness, nor reveal anything unusual about his armor. As he finished the stroke, a rune was drawn and emitted a faint light. This indicated the rune was successfully created, and it now contained mana. However, that was not all. A first-level rune held very little magic power, far less even than a micro-magic stone. To unleash its true power, it would rely on quantity. According to Rocky's estimation, he needed to draw at least 100 first-level runes on the chest plate to truly enhance its defensive power, a monumental task. So, after successfully drawing one rune, he immediately drew a second, then a third. Half a day passed in this manner, and by evening, Rocky left the lab with all his magic power depleted. The next morning, Joshi came seeking an audience with Rocky, seemingly eager to finalize the transaction involving the yarn as soon as possible. This was somewhat unexpected to him as he had planned to delay, but since Joshi was so proactive, he had no choice but to call for Aileen. N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. By the time Aileen arrived at the City Lord's Hall, a new round of negotiations began. The morning flew by, and the outcome of the negotiations remained the same as the day before. Almost no progress was made, with Joshi standing firm on increasing the price by 30% without budging. On the contrary, Aileen seemed somewhat off today. Whereas yesterday, she could stand toe-to-toe with Joshi, today she was visibly distracted, which was a significant reason why the negotiations failed. Having no other choice, Rocky had to find an excuse to forcibly halt the negotiations, planning to give Aileen some time to think of a solution, but Joshi did not give Rocky that opportunity. City Lord. Yesterday, the Chamber of Commerce sent an urgent notice. I am summoned back to headquarters for important matters, so I can only stay here for one more day. I hope the City Lord can provide a definitive answer tomorrow to finalize this matter quickly, said Joshi before he turned and left. His words clearly meant he was no longer willing to delay and was pushing Rocky to make a decision quickly. Sir, I will also take my leave. After Joshi left, Rocky initially wanted to discuss with Aileen what to do next, as they couldn't afford to delay any longer. But to his surprise, Aileen left without saying a word. Rocky, Aileen was a bit off today. After Aileen left, Lilia said to Rocky, noticing that Aileen had been acting strangely. There is something off. He nodded, equally puzzled, not understanding what was wrong with Aileen. I'll go ask her. After saying this, Lilia didn't wait for Rocky's response and immediately chased out of the City Lord's Hall. Looking at Lilia chasing after Aileen, Rocky helplessly shook his head. He was relieved to have Lilia around. Otherwise, he truly didn't know what to do in such a situation. Actually, Rocky could also tell that Aileen wasn't quite herself, but he didn't know how to broach the subject. After all, the two of them didn't share any personal relationship, but were merely in a subordinate one. Setting that aside for now, Lilia, who had left the City Lord's Hall, quickly caught up with Aileen. Aileen, wait a moment. By the time Lilia had caught up with Aileen, she was already preparing to board a carriage. Called to a halt, she turned back and saw Lilia approaching. Captain Lilia. Seeing Lilia, Aileen didn't dare to neglect her manners, promptly nodding to her as a sign of politeness. Now, Lilia was the captain of the Guard Corps, holding a position equivalent to Aileen's, and what was more important, she was one of Rocky's confidants. Thus, even though Aileen wasn't very familiar with Lilia, she still showed her due respect. Captain Lilia, does the City Lord have any instructions? Knowing her departure was somewhat abrupt, Aileen quickly asked when Lilia approached. Nothing from the city lord, I just wanted to talk to you. Glancing at Aileen, Lilia smiled and said, if you don't have any matters to attend to, why don't you take a walk with me? After saying this, Lilia didn't even wait for Eileen's response before she walked ahead, causing Aileen to have no choice but to follow. So, the two women walked side by side out of the city lord's mansion, a carriage trailing behind them, looking just like two noble ladies taking a leisurely afternoon stroll. How has Lord Voss been recently? Grandfather is doing well. Ambling through the streets, Lilia casually asked, and Aileen casually answered. However, Eileen's mind was somewhat perplexed, for she couldn't make out Lilia's intentions. With her intelligence, Aileen naturally understood that Lilia coming to find her was not for small talk. There must be another reason. Yet, she couldn't fathom what it could be. Could it be that Rocky had sent Lilia to see her? Impossible. If it were Rocky's instructions, then he would have simply directed her to see him directly. No need for Lilia to be involved. Aileen, have you encountered any troubles? As Aileen was musing, Lilia's question took her aback, and she quickly shook her head. I don't have any troubles. Is that so? Lilia looked at her skeptically. It's not just me who noticed you weren't quite yourself today. The city lord also saw it, which is why he asked me to come and check on you. I truly appreciate the city lord's concern, but I'm fine. Continuing to shake her head, Aileen said nothing more. Seeing that she had no intention of opening up, Lilia suddenly laughed, which bewildered Aileen. Do you remember Parolo? After her laugh, Lilia suddenly asked, Parolo? I remember. Although Aileen did not understand why Lilia brought up that person, she nodded her head. Of course, she remembered the former administrative officer. What do you think of Parolo? A waste. Without a second thought, Aileen voiced her opinion of Parolo. In her eyes, Parolo was nothing but a waste, and she even found it an insult for her grandfather to have to work with such a person. And Lilia, in response to that answer, nodded and added, Parolo is not only a waste but also a scumbag who can't control himself around women. When I first came to Thunderhawk City, Parolo harbored improper thoughts towards me, and he didn't let go of them until he was caught by the city lord. Lilia's words staggered Aileen. She couldn't believe the other woman would share such a thing with her, someone who was hardly even a friend. Yet those very words struck a chord with Aileen. Deep down, Aileen was painfully aware of how badly she had behaved today, and the reason for that was the incident that occurred with Jiashi. The previous day's events had a significant impact on her, scaring her thoroughly. But Aileen was strong, so strong that she was stubborn. She hadn't mentioned yesterday's events to anyone, not even to her grandfather Voss, intending to bear the burden alone. However, she never expected Lilia to have noticed. As bright as she was, Aileen immediately realized why Lilia had sought her out. After a moment, she looked at Lilia and, biting her lip, asked what happened afterwards. Lilia has just said that Parolo had unsavory intentions towards her. So what happened next? How did it end? Afterwards, Lilia gave a slight smile towards Aileen and patted her side sword. Well, when I was ready to chop off his head, he ran away. This answer astonished Aileen, and it wasn't until she snapped back to reality that she looked at Lilia with newfound admiration in her eyes. She imagined a scene where Lilia, with her sword at the ready, pointed it straight at a terrified Parolo, scaring him out of his wits. If only I could muster the grace and imposing presence of Lilia, and point my sword at Jiashi, I wonder if that old bastard would still dare to touch my hand. Would he still harbor inappropriate thoughts about me? Unfortunately, I am not Lilia. With that thought, Aileen couldn't help but sigh. However, she suddenly thought of something and blurted out, Does the city lord know about this? He doesn't know. Lilia shook her head upon hearing this and sighed. I haven't told him about this matter, and even if he had known at the time, there was nothing he could have done. As Lilia thought about it, she felt a sense of helplessness, much like how Rocky regarded her, as someone closest to him. In Lilia's heart, Rocky was also the person she trusted the most. It was just that Rocky at the time was really... But then she turned to Aileen with a smile. But if it were now, I would tell the city lord about it. Why? Because the city lord would help me. He would back me up, Lilia said with certainty as she looked at Aileen. Her words were no lie. Indeed, Rocky used to be too timid, a fact even Lilia admitted. But now, Rocky had changed, and although she didn't know why he had changed, he had undoubtedly become better than he was before. So if a similar situation were to occur again, Lilia would definitely tell Rocky, and Rocky would absolutely back her up. Aileen was stunned by her words. She of course understood what Lilia meant, but after a moment she still let out a wry smile. Yes, the City Lord would indeed back you up. Aileen believed Lilia's words, but let's not forget that the one speaking was Lilia herself. She was Rocky's confidant, possibly even his lover, whereas Aileen didn't share such a connection with Rocky. Aileen was well aware of her place, knowing she was merely the finance officer recommended to Rocky by her grandfather. No, he would help you too. Just as Aileen was privately sighing, Lilia suddenly took her hand and looked into her eyes. You might not quite understand Rocky yet. Whether in the past or now, he's a good person. As long as you can support him well, he will never let you down. Rocky is also worthy of your trust. His achievements in the future will be boundless. Really? Upon hearing this, Aileen also gazed intently at Lilia, her eyes suddenly filled with curiosity. Does the City Lord have such aspirations? It's not aspiration, but an inevitable outcome. Lilia was very clear about the future that awaited Rocky once he mastered the mana runes. Without exaggeration, as long as he could get through the current difficult period and had enough time, Rocky was destined to become a prominent figure in this sky. This was the reason Lilia had so much confidence in Rocky. Unfortunately, Aileen was not aware of this, so after listening to Lilia, she just smiled. Perhaps, but Captain Lilia, you should know that the City Lord won't only be dealing with the likes of Parolo. It's all the same. Aileen's skepticism didn't surprise Lilia, mainly because Aileen was still unaware that Rocky had mastered the top technology of mana runes. Therefore, she didn't argue further, but said with full confidence, be it Parolo or Joshi, they're just clowns who can only strut around for a while. In front of Rocky, the current Joshi is no different from the former Parolo. By the time Lilia returned to the City Lord's mansion and saw Rocky in the laboratory, it was already the afternoon. She and Aileen had chatted for a long time, almost seeing Aileen all the way home before coming back. You're back. What took you so long? In the lab, Rocky was still busy inscribing runes for the Void magic armor. At least 31st level runes had been etched inside the lining of the chest plate of the armor. However, as soon as he saw Lilia return, he put down his pen. I had a chat with Aileen, so I got a bit held up, she said. Oh, did you find out why she's been off her game? Rocky was curious to hear Lilia mention this, so he couldn't help but ask. It's because of Joshi. After taking a sip of water, Lilia recounted the matter to Rocky. Rocky frowned upon hearing it. That old bastard is really trying to play the dirty old man, and I haven't had my chance with her yet. You're still green yourself, so quit thinking about tender grass. Lilia unexpectedly heard his muttering, and Rocky, startled, quickly retracted his head and hurriedly said, I got it. I'll handle this matter. N/O/vel/B//into C//OM. After saying that, he picked up the magic energy pen again, seemingly ready to continue inscribing runes. But then he seemed to remember something and turned to look at Lilia again. Lilia, it seems like you had noticed something between Aileen and Joshi long ago, right? Did you ever encounter something similar? Rocky might have been a bit slow on the uptake with this issue, but he was not a fool and immediately sensed there was more to it. However, Lilia responded with a faint smile and, heading towards the door, said, Of course not. If anything like that had happened, I'd have told you. Why does everything seem so strange today? Watching Lilia turn around and leave, with an impish smile still on her face, Rocky was utterly confused. What was going on today? It was one thing that Aileen was acting out of sorts, but why did Lilia also seem off? Women, truly baffling. Shaking his head, Rocky put this intricate issue, one even the saints might not understand, to the back of his mind and continued with the magic energy pen. The situation Aileen found herself in, to be honest, had relieved him of concern, because it meant he didn't need to hold on to any hope for the negotiations. He just had to focus wholeheartedly on thinking of other methods. As for the matter of the rising yarn prices, and that shameless Jia, she who wanted to use it to blackmail either him or Eileen, he naturally had ways to cope. But the precondition was he must successfully turn his void magic armor into rune equipment, so as to further enhance its power. So Rocky quickly cast all concerns aside and started to focus on drawing runes on the armor. A day passed in the blink of an eye, and soon it was the next morning. The following morning, not waiting for Overseer Jia she to come to him, Rocky took the lead and called both him and Eileen to the City Lord's Hall. City Lord, have you made up your mind regarding this trade? Upon seeing Rocky, Joshi still wore the same polite smile as the previous 2 days, his demeanor courteous, radiating confidence. Overseer Joshi, the terms you've proposed. Just as Joshi was awaiting Rocky's reply, Eileen, who was standing next to Rocky, spoke first. After a thorough conversation with Lilia, Eileen had evidently readjusted herself and was ready for a rematch with Joshi. But just as she was about to speak, Rocky, from his position as the city lord, gestured with his hand, interrupting her, and looked towards Joshi, Overseer Joshi, about the price of yarn. We accept, Rocky said expressionlessly as he looked at Joshi. My lord! Not only did Eileen, who was ready to challenge Joshi, freeze in shock upon hearing this, but Joshi himself also abruptly raised his head, looking incredulously at Rocky. My lord! At this moment, Eileen couldn't worry about formalities and leaned close to Rocky's ear to say, My lord, I've thought of a way to deal with Joshi. Please give me another chance. Eileen wasn't just making empty talk or being boastful this time, because after Lilia sent her home the day before, she adjusted her state and thought of a method to handle Joshi. Joshi's unwillingness to budge in the negotiations and his brazen confidence were rooted in his belief that Thunderhawk City could only import yarn from the Azure Commerce Guild. However, if the guild insisted on raising the yarn prices so much, Thunderhawk City could simply purchase the yarn at the same high prices from other chambers of commerce. This approach might not benefit Thunderhawk City, as they would still need to spend more money to acquire yarn, but for the Azure Commerce Guild, it meant losing a client in Thunderhawk City. And for Joshi, who had come for these negotiations, it would signify his failure. If he caused the loss of Thunderhawk City as a long-term and stable client, wouldn't that count as a failure? This was exactly the bargaining chip Thunderhawk City needed. And once she had this chip in hand, Eileen believed she could definitely drive the yarn prices down. Not to overpromise, but reducing the increased rate to within 20% was absolutely feasible. Only, she never expected Rocky to suddenly agree to the other party's proposal, not planning to let her negotiate further. This was totally beyond her expectations, which was why she couldn't help but whisper to Rocky. But in response to her whisper, Rocky simply smiled with an air of confidence, subtly shaking his head at Eileen before turning his gaze back to Joshi. Overseer Joshi, we'll go with the yarn price you've mentioned. Please, have your merchant ships offload the goods as soon as possible. Yes. Looking up at Rocky, Joshi hastily affirmed. However, his expression at that moment contained no joy whatsoever. Logically, this outcome was precisely what he wanted. Although he didn't manage to get Eileen, he was, after all, a merchant. Having successfully concluded the deal, he should feel delighted regardless of the circumstances. But Joshi could not bring himself to feel happy, as when his gaze fell upon Rocky, he experienced an unexplained pang in his heart. In his sight, Rocky sat firmly in the city lord's position, looking down on him with an expressionless face. This made Joshi extremely uncomfortable. He had been in big situations before and had even personally dealt with city lords of some medium-sized sky cities, individuals who were tycoons in these skies. The feeling Rocky gave him now was exactly the same as those giants. That was why Joshi couldn't feel happy. He even thought that maybe in this matter he had gone a bit too far. Even though the negotiation concluded in his favor, had he possibly upset the city lord before him? Just a lord of a broken little city. What do I have to fear? As soon as these thoughts emerged, Joshi quickly consoled himself. Rocky was nothing but the lord of a minor sky city, struggling to protect himself. What was there to fear? Even if the city lord remembered this with resentment, what could he do? So, after a moment of self-reassurance, Joshi bowed to Rocky and left the city lord's hall to arrange for the cargo ships to be unloaded. Once he had departed, Aline, who couldn't understand at all why Rocky would behave this way, couldn't hold back any longer and finally blurted out, "My lord, why did you agree to his demands?" I could have continued to negotiate with him. Aileen was originally very angry about Rocky's decision, which she found not only rash but also quite thoughtless. However, when she recalled her own performance the past couple of days, her confidence waned. She even suspected that Rocky's impatience might be due to a lost hope in her. However, Rocky's following words left Aileen stunned. Rocky then smiled and said, "Aileen, I know of course you could have found a way, but for someone like Joshi, there's no need for my finance officer to go through such trouble. Just let him be." After expressing his indifference, he switched topics and asked, "How are the arrangements for the magic stones coming along?" "The merchants have already been contacted, and they will arrive within the next few days. N/O/vel/B/and.C/////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// saying? After giving Eileen a few instructions, Rocky suddenly changed the subject. I plan to send Thunderhawk City to the Eternal City, so prepare yourself. You're the one I'll be counting on when the time comes. Eternal City? The mention of Eternal City by Rocky made Eileen freeze, not understanding his intentions. The Eternal City Rocky referred to was also a sky city, but no ordinary sky city. It was one of the biggest cities in the skies, known for being a god city. The hierarchy of sky cities had been widely recognized many years ago. Cities like Thunderhawk City, with populations under 10,000, are all classified as small sky cities. Only when the population exceeds 10,000 do they qualify as medium-sized sky cities. The population ceiling for medium-sized sky cities is 100,000. Once the population exceeds 100,000, it becomes a large sky city. Songlong City, where the headquarters of Azure Commerce Guild is located, just barely exceeds the threshold with a population over 100,000, making it a large sky city. But above the large sky cities is another level, the divine cities. The so-called divine cities are the super-large cities with populations above 1 million. In the whole sky, there are only 10 divine cities, known as the top 10 divine cities. These 10 god cities are the true behemoths of the skies, and the forces they represent are the most elite tycoons in the skies, dividing and ruling the sky among themselves. Even among the top 10 divine cities, the Eternal City mentioned by Rocky was the most special, as it is a neutral city open to all, belonging to no particular power, and also the largest trade center in the entire sky. What puzzled Eileen was exactly this. Eternal City is a neutral city, to which Thunderhawk City could certainly go, but what for? As the biggest trade city in the entire sky, those who go to the Eternal City either go for business or for leisure and enjoyment. But neither has anything to do with Rocky or Thunderhawk City. Try as she might, Eileen couldn't fathom why Rocky wanted to go to the Eternal City, so she asked, "My lord, you want to go to the Eternal City? For what purpose?" "Of course, to make money," he said. Rocky looked at Eileen with a chuckle. "You'll know when the time comes. What exactly have you planned?" After Eileen left with deep confusion, Lilia couldn't help but ask Rocky. Now, even she was a bit puzzled by what was going through Rocky's mind, and she was equally curious as to why he wanted to go to Eternal City. "Don't worry, you'll know when the time comes." Rocky gave her a confident smirk and then asked, "Lilia, how long do you estimate it will take Thunderhawk City to fly to Eternal City?" One of the biggest differences between Sky City and cities on land is their ability to fly in the air, meaning they can go anywhere they want, albeit slowly. So when Rocky mentioned going to Eternal City, he wasn't suggesting taking a skyship, but flying the whole of Thunderhawk City there. Well, at least a month, I guess. Eternal City seldom moves, and from our current position, it should not be too far. That's good to know. Rocky nodded upon hearing the time estimation and then left the City Lord's Hall, diving into his research room as usual. A month was not too long, nor too short. But he had to finish the runification of the void magic armor within this period, or else the following matters would be troublesome. So after returning to his research room, he immediately picked up his magic energy pen and continued drawing runes on the breastplate of the void magic armor. With days of effort, he had successfully drawn nearly 100 first-level runes on the breastplate, but even so, it was still not enough. The void magic armor itself already had extremely high defensive power, and to further enhance it with runes on that basis required a massive amount of runes to provide mana support. Therefore, by Rocky's conservative estimation, he needed to draw over 200 runes on the breastplate to truly make an effect. This was a massive project which not only consumed magic power but also drained his energy, and was by no means a task that could be completed casually. Consequently, in the days that followed, he never stepped out of his research room, sometimes even choosing to sleep there. After 3 whole days, he finally managed to draw a total of 200 mana runes on the breastplate. Phew, it is finally complete. Looking at his work, completed day and night, Rocky took a long breath of relief and immediately moved on to the wrist guard of the void magic armor on the research table without stopping. N/O/vel/b/in.c//on. Yes, simply drawing runes on the breastplate was far from enough for him. He intended to draw runes on the entire set of void magic armor to undergo a comprehensive enhancement. The reason he called it enhancement rather than modification was because everything he was doing now did not cause any fundamental changes to the void magic armor. It was merely an enhancement using runes. Frankly speaking, his usage of runes was truly an underapplication, for the potential and changes that mana runes could bring about were far beyond simple enhancement. But the predicament was that the current Rocky indeed lacked the conditions and capability to bring out the true potential of the runes, and this method of using them to enhance the void magic armor was already his limit. However, even if his method wronged the mana runes, should it succeed, it would still be considered a pioneering act. Time went on, day by day, and half a month passed in the blink of an eye. During this period, Rocky spent almost every day in his research room, and the set of void magic armor he owned was gradually filled with runes, one piece after another. As time progressed, Rocky's speed in drawing runes visibly increased. This was partly due to his increasingly proficient technique, and partly because, apart from the breastplate, the other parts of the void magic armor were smaller, hence accommodating fewer runes. While Rocky was wholeheartedly enhancing the void magic armor, 2 things happened within Thunderhawk City. The first was the arrival of people from the Gold and Purple Flower Commerce Chamber. As mentioned before, there were only 2 chambers of commerce that had trade relations with Thunderhawk City. Azure Commerce Guild was responsible for selling yarn and food to the city, while the cloth produced by Thunderhawk City would be sold to the Gold and Purple Flower Commerce Chamber. Compared to the Azure Commerce Guild, backed by Songlong City, the cloth-buying Gold and Purple Flower Commerce Chamber was much smaller. The chamber's headquarters were in a mid-sized sky city, and it was a standard organization with average strength. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come to purchase cloth from Thunderhawk City for a bargain. Fortunately, despite its small size, the Gold and Purple Flower Commerce Chamber had a good reputation, so this transaction went smoothly, and Thunderhawk City managed to sell all its cloth without any trouble. The second event that occurred during this period also involved a transaction. It was the arrival of the magic stone merchants contacted by Aileen. Since Rocky had only a few medium magic stones, the Chamber of Commerce would not make a special appearance for this, and only a few merchants came to Thunderhawk City. However, due to the previous failed negotiations with the Azure Commerce Guild, Aileen felt very guilty, believing her own incompetence led to the failure. So when dealing with the few magic stone merchants, she really put her heart into it. Who knows what method she used, but when Aileen sold all the magic stones that Rocky had handed over to her, she actually fetched a price of a full 3,000 gold coins. This price greatly exceeded Rocky's expectations. He may not be a businessman, nor was he familiar with the market, but he still had some understanding of the approximate price of a medium magic stone. A fully charged medium magic stone typically valued around 500 gold coins. And since Rocky initially only found 4 medium magic stones from the Research Institute, he estimated that these 4 magic stones could sell for 2,000 gold coins at best. However, he never expected Aileen to be so amazing, managing to increase the final price by 1,000 gold coins. That was equivalent to a 50% increase. Aileen, how exactly did you do it? When Aileen told Rocky the result, even he, who wasn't much interested in trading, couldn't help but ask. My lord, I just took advantage of the other party's mindset, she said. Looking at the ever-curious Rocky, the frustration that had been weighing on Aileen's chest these past few days finally relieved itself quite a bit. Her last negotiation with the Azure Commerce Guild had cost her several sleepless nights. She had never thought she would lose so miserably. Even though Rocky hadn't complained about her at all over this matter, Aileen couldn't get past it herself. Her resilience and her pride couldn't accept such a crushing defeat, so she was very driven in the trade of the magic stones, determined to perform well in front of Rocky. It wasn't that Aileen valued Rocky's opinion of her too highly, but rather she didn't allow anyone to look down on her. It seems that Lord Voss's recommendation was indeed correct, Rocky said. Seeing Aileen's confident demeanor, returning to the proud, noble young lady she once was, Rocky was reassured. As for the specifics of the deal and exactly what methods Aileen used, he actually didn't care. By the way, how much money do we have in the city now? Thinking about the recent sale of the city's fabrics and now the sale of the magic stones, Rocky felt like he should have quite a bit of money by now, right? My lord, there are roughly 67,000 gold coins in the city. Aileen, the finance officer, naturally knew Thunderhawk City's financial details like the back of her hand, and so she gave him an exact figure on the spot. However, after giving this number, the previously somewhat exuberant Aileen lost her smile, and her expression turned serious. My lord, winter is approaching. You should consider purchasing grain. Our last trade with the Azure Commerce Guild made it clear they intend to take advantage of the Songlong City war to hike their prices, and as a result the price of yarn has gone up. In a few days, the price they sell us grain will also rise, and the increase won't be small. The saying that one falling leaf foretells the coming of autumn was evident through the increase in yarn prices by the Azure Commerce Guild. It could be inferred that the price of grain they would sell to us would not be at the original price either. It was bound to rise as well. What was more important was that Rocky had easily accepted the price of the yarn before, which undoubtedly signaled to the Azure Commerce Guild that Thunderhawk City had money. So, not only would they hike the price of grain, but the increase would certainly not be small. As the finance officer, Aileen understood this matter better than anyone, so she had to remind Rocky, warning him not to think that a few tens of thousands of gold coins made Thunderhawk City secure. When the need arose, those 60 or 70,000 gold coins might not be enough at all. I know. How could I possibly forget something like that? But don't worry, I have a plan in my mind, and you'll see when we get to Eternal City. However, faced with Aileen's warning, Rocky dismissed it with nonchalance and didn't wait for Aileen to continue before sending her away, which caused her considerable consternation. She even felt that Rocky had become arrogant due to having some money. It wasn't just her who thought so. Even Lilia, who was beside Rocky, frowned after the event and couldn't help but say to him, "You should have let Aileen finish speaking. She was indeed looking out for you this time." "I know," Rocky replied. After glancing at the furrowed brow of Lilia, Rocky smiled faintly and then, unexpectedly, made a proposal. "Lilia, would you be interested in joining me for some martial technique practice? What do you want to do with me?" Rocky's words made Lilia question if there was something wrong with her ears. They were clearly discussing important matters concerning Thunderhawk City. How did the conversation suddenly shift to this topic? "Didn't you say I should practice more? I'm free today, so I thought I'd seek your guidance." With a hearty laugh, Rocky didn't give Lilia any time to respond and pulled her away from the City Lord's Hall, heading straight to the garden behind the City Lord's mansion. The so-called garden behind the City Lord's mansion was actually just a relatively large grassy area. Logically, this was where Rocky practiced his martial techniques, but he hadn't been there since his arrival from another world. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. Rocky, do you really want to practice martial techniques with me? Having been forcefully dragged to the garden, Lilia was still somewhat disbelieving. She had indeed urged Rocky to spend more time on martial techniques and magic, but Rocky had never listened. What was different today that he was so proactive? Of course, facing Lilia's disbelief, Rocky appeared very confident, clearly not joking. But then he quickly added, "However, you are much higher in level than me, so I need to wear the void magic armor." Void magic armor? You've already successfully modified the void magic armor? Lilia, being very intelligent and aware that Rocky had been working on modifying the void magic armor using runes, immediately thought of this when he mentioned it. It's not a modification, just an enhancement. Lilia's words made Rocky unable to resist showing a proud smile because, as Lilia had said, after many days of effort, he had finally succeeded in enhancing the void magic armor using runes. That's why he had sought out Lilia to try his hand and see what kind of power the enhanced void magic armor could unleash. You really did it? Seeing Rocky's proud face, Lilia was also extremely delighted, because whether it was an enhancement or a modification using runes, it was a pioneering act. Thus, Lilia too became excited and was very interested in the enhanced void magic armor. Afterward, Rocky returned to his room, put on the void magic armor, and didn't leave through the door. Instead, he flew directly out the window to the garden. Really? Seeing his somewhat ostentatious entrance, Lilia shook her head helplessly, thinking that at times Rocky really did seem like a child who had never grown up. However, she quickly turned her attention to the void magic armor, eager to see what the enhanced armor looked like. Unfortunately, when she looked at Rocky, she found that the void magic armor he wore still looked the same. While it still appeared impressive, there was no change in its shape, and there wasn't even a rune visible. This wasn't surprising because Rocky, in order to avoid drawing attention, had specifically drawn the runes inside the lining of the void magic armor. Thus, the real change in the armor was internal. After making a stylish entry, Rocky looked up at Lilia with confidence and said, "Should I go easy on you? Go easy on me?" This comment made Lilia laugh out loud. The void magic armor might be strong, but its effectiveness depended largely on the person wearing it. With Rocky's limited abilities, even in the void magic armor, Lilia was not worried. So, without saying anything further, Lilia drew her side sword from her waist and pointed the tip at Rocky. "You better be careful. I won't hold back." The moment her words hit the air, she suddenly lunged forward, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye, and then swept her sword toward his chest. Curious about the power of the enhanced void magic armor, Lilia went all out from the start, not holding back at all. Knowing that with the armor's protection, Rocky was unlikely to get hurt, she didn't need to worry. It must be said that Lilia was definitely not just for show. Not only did she possess the strength of a third-level warrior, she had also experienced the carnage of the battlefield firsthand, truly qualifying her as a genuine warrior. Therefore, even when faced with Rocky wearing the enhanced void magic armor, which brought him up to the level of a fourth-level warrior, she was not afraid at all. In the blink of an eye, Rocky hadn't even fully grasped Lilia's movements when he felt the sword light at his chest. Then, he heard a clang as the sword struck directly upon his chest. Although it didn't injure him, the immense force still pushed him back several steps. This is the enhanced void magic armor? Unexpectedly, with one strike, Lilia forced Rocky into a retreat. She paused, totally not anticipating this outcome. The enhanced void magic armor seemed no different from before. Rocky, equally surprised by this result, stabilized himself after retreating 4 or 5 steps and was utterly astonished. He had not expected Lilia to strike as quickly as she did, nor did he anticipate such immense power. And just as he was secretly amazed, Lilia appeared in front of him again. "Wait!" Seeing Lilia charge at him again, Rocky was just about to speak when he realized that Lilia had only feinted an attack before disappearing from his view. By the time he relocated Lilia, he had already been fiercely kicked, following her feint which had allowed her to move behind him and kick him off balance. Wait a second. In just a few rounds of engagement, Rocky was already thoroughly disoriented and hurriedly tried to call a halt. Unfortunately, Lilia didn't give him a chance to speak. Her figure blurred once more as she charged at him again, forcing him to leap into the air and fly up. Lilia, wait a minute. Having escaped into midair, Rocky tried to continue speaking, but then saw Lilia on the ground raising her hand toward him. This gesture immediately made Rocky's skin crawl, followed by a foreboding exclamation. But it was already too late, because afterwards, Lilia sent 3 fireballs hurling towards him with whooshing sounds. Lilia was not only a 3rd-level warrior, but also a level 2 mage. Facing the 3 fireballs flying towards him, Rocky hurriedly dodged. Just when he barely managed to avoid them, he spotted a figure leaping from the ground out of the corner of his eye, then felt himself being powerfully kicked and sent crashing towards the ground. With a boom, Rocky slammed into the ground like a shot-down cannonball, creating a huge crater in the grass. For a moment, dust was thrown up, completely covering the spot where he landed, making it impossible to see the situation inside. It wasn't until a while later that the dust finally settled, revealing Rocky's disheveled figure. At that moment, Rocky was a complete mess, his void magic armor covered in mud, looking like a soldier who had just fled a lost battle. Seeing his disheveled state, Lilia also opened her mouth awkwardly, and it took her a long while to finally say, "Rocky, is this your enhanced void magic armor? It seems no different from before." Although she didn't want to demoralize Rocky, Lilia couldn't help but speak her true thoughts. She really couldn't see any difference in the void magic armor. Defeating Rocky without him being able to resist was exactly the expected outcome, because Rocky lacked actual combat experience and had only mediocre fundamentals. Thus, even with the void magic armor, he couldn't win against Lilia, a fact known to both of them. Lilia had initially thought that after being enhanced by runes, the void magic armor would greatly increase Rocky's capabilities, at least making him not so inadequate against her. But now it seemed not to be the case at all, as if the enhancement of the void magic armor did nothing. However, just as she finished speaking, Rocky, crawling up from the ground, started to roar. "What do you mean no difference? Who asked you to move so quickly? I haven't even activated the rune's mana yet." Now, Rocky was infuriated. Because Lilia had acted too quickly, he had absolutely no time to activate the rune's mana. "I'm so pissed. Why couldn't you wait until I was ready before attacking?" After climbing up from the ground in a disheveled state, Rocky couldn't help but roar at Lilia. It turned out that Lilia had acted too quickly just now, and Rocky hadn't been prepared at all. He had been flattened before he could even activate the runes on his armor. This outcome had nearly infuriated Rocky to death. The reason he had challenged Lilia to a spar was partly to test how powerful the enhanced void magic armor was after its upgrade. He knew Lilia was the highest-ranked and most experienced warrior in Thunderhawk City, and only by fighting her could he truly evaluate the strength of the enhanced void magic armor. On the other hand, Rocky actually wanted to show off in front of Lilia. In Rocky's view, Lilia was perfect in every way. If he had to point out a flaw, it was that she was too dominant. Not only was her personality assertive, but her strength was formidable as well. Having such a strong woman by his side all the time almost constantly bruised his ego, so he also wanted to prove himself in front of Lilia, even if it meant wearing the void magic armor. But the result turned out to be a thorough thrashing from the get-go, which was nothing like what Rocky had anticipated. Hearing his words, Lilia showed a rare expression of embarrassment. She genuinely hadn't expected things to turn out this way. Looking at Rocky, who seemed to have suffered a great injustice, she had no idea what to say. "Wait until I'm ready before you attack this time." After muttering sulkily, Rocky tried to calm himself down. Then he began to harness his magic power to connect with the runes on the void magic armor, activating the mana within them and truly enhancing the armor in the intended way. Time ticked away second by second. During this process, Lilia didn't dare to move an inch, afraid of disturbing Rocky, and remained standing opposite him. After a while, she couldn't help but ask, Are you ready yet?" "Ready." This time, Rocky finally nodded his head. Now he had connected to every rune on the void magic armor with his own magic power, fully activating them all. "Really?" Seeing him nod, Lilia still hesitated to act because she didn't notice any change in the void magic armor from before. Although Rocky claimed to be ready now, he still looked as disheveled as before, making Lilia reluctant to make her move. She didn't want to hurt Rocky's pride again. Come on. Seemingly discerning her hesitancy, Rocky was significantly more confident than before, nodding firmly at Lilia. Are you sure? Sure, come on. Seeing how certain Rocky was, Lilia took a deep breath, and when she looked at him again, her eyes were razor-sharp. Lilia's nature was such that once she got serious, she would show no mercy. Since Rocky claimed he was genuinely prepared this time, she gripped her long sword tightly and dashed toward him like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, she reached Rocky and swung her sword in a sweeping strike aimed directly at his chest. Previously, it was this very strike that had forced Rocky to retreat, and she used the same move this time, with undiminished strength. Faced with the same attack as before, Rocky didn't react in time, or for some other reason. He didn't dodge, allowing the sword to land on him. A loud clang resounded as the longsword struck heavily against the armor. How? How could this be? Having struck Rocky with her sword, Lilia was stunned because the strike, which was identical in technique and force to the previous one, resulted in a completely different outcome. Before, her single strike had made Rocky retreat uncontrollably, backing up 4 or 5 steps before stopping. But this time, Rocky, having been hit, didn't budge an inch, not even a sway. How could there be such a big difference? This result, far beyond Lilia's expectations, left her astonished, as she knew her strike was without reservation, a genuine full-force attack. How could it have no effect? It wasn't like this before. The astonishment on Lilia's face finally brought a smile to Rocky's lips, his heart swelling with pride. He had deliberately not dodged just now, wanting to see what kind of defensive power the combination of void magic armor and mana runes could produce. The result was unexpectedly good, easily blocking Lilia's attack, which meant that Rocky's enhancement of the void magic armor had been a success. He had successfully used mana runes to enhance the void magic armor, significantly increasing its defensive power, convincingly proving its ability to withstand Lilia's attack without budging. Unimaginable. While Rocky could hardly contain his triumph, Lilia couldn't help but marvel. She truly hadn't expected the enhanced void magic armor to improve so much. Normally, Rocky's set of void magic armor would only raise his strength to the level of a 4th-level warrior and a 3rd-level mage, but Lilia's own strength was already at the pinnacle of a 3rd-level warrior. Combined with her rich combat experience, her fighting power wasn't much different from that of a 4th-level warrior, which was why she had been able to suppress Rocky wearing the void magic armor before. But now, Rocky's void magic armor had clearly been upgraded a notch in terms of defense. Lilia had extensive combat experience and knew well enough that even a 4th-level warrior couldn't effortlessly withstand her full-force strike. Yet Rocky had done just that, and he hadn't even defended actively. It was the void magic armor's own defensive power that had blocked her complete strike. What did this indicate? It meant that the enhanced void magic armor had definitely surpassed the defensive level of a 4th-level warrior and might even have reached 5th-level capability. This enhancement was a qualitative leap. Perhaps even Rocky hadn't expected the void magic armor, once enhanced by runes, would receive such an astonishing improvement. To verify this possibility, Lilia flashed behind Rocky's back in an instant, delivering a ferocious kick to his back before he could react. With a thud, Lilia put all her strength into the kick that squarely hit Rocky's back, yet he remained immovable as a mountain. The enhanced void magic armor had once again perfectly blocked her attack. How is it? Impressive, isn't it? Slowly turning around, Rocky was like a child eager for praise, impatiently asking. Facing his demeanor, Lilia couldn't help but feel both helpless and fond. Yet she seriously nodded. It's very strong. Really? Yes. Seeing Rocky's excitement, Lilia honestly said, with the void magic armor and the rune's reinforcement, your defensive power has reached the level of a 5th-level warrior. My attacks can no longer defeat you. It has reached the level of a 5th-level warrior? That's incredible. I didn't expect the enhancement effect to be so apparent. Hearing Lilia's words, Rocky was surprised as well. He had truly not anticipated such a huge improvement in the void magic armor after its enhancement. Attack me? And just as Rocky was also amazed by the enhanced void magic armor, Lilia took a step back to create some distance and then said to him, "Attack me. Let me see if the void magic armor has also reached the offensive power of a 5th level warrior." "All right." Nodding, Rocky gripped his sword tightly and then charged towards Lilia with large strides. Before the rune enhancement, the void magic armor could bring Rocky up to the standard of a 4th level warrior, so his speed was by no means slow. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Lilia, swinging his sword down so fast. As Rocky charged towards her, Lilia didn't dare to slack and quickly raised her sword to block. But in the next second, she inwardly cursed and gracefully dodged the strike. "That's enough. No need to continue." Seeing Lilia dodge the attack, Rocky originally intended to keep on the offensive, but Lilia immediately called a halt. "What's the matter?" Not expecting Lilia to stop the fight, Rocky was a bit taken aback. "There's no need to continue. The dual reinforcement of the void magic armor and the rune has brought your offensive power to the level of a 5th level warrior, too. I simply can't withstand it, and given that you have a rune on your sword, my ordinary sword would be sliced in two if it were to block." As she spoke, Lilia helplessly shook her head. The dual reinforcement from the void magic armor and the rune had brought Rocky up to the level of a 5th level warrior both offensively and defensively, creating a gap that could no longer be bridged by experience and skill. So there was no point in continuing the fight. "That's great. That means my enhancement was a complete success." Lilia's assessment finally put Rocky at ease, as it confirmed the complete and even beyond expected success of his enchantment on the void magic armor. Rocky, n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. However, just as Rocky was reveling in joy, Lilia walked up to him and couldn't help but speak up. "I have something I want to ask you." "Oh, what is it? Why the rush to enhance the void magic armor?" Looking into Rocky's eyes, Lilia voiced the question that had been on her mind for a while. She'd been curious why Rocky was so hasty in enhancing the void magic armor. It was something she couldn't figure out. The study of mana runes was indeed important, and Lilia admitted that. But let's not forget Rocky wasn't a researcher. He was the city lord of Thunderhawk City, which was facing a significant crisis at the moment. Winter was fast approaching, and they had yet to secure food for the season, which should be the top priority for a city lord. Yet, rather than focusing on these matters, Rocky had been devoting all his attention to enhancing the void magic armor, something Lilia couldn't understand. Because Rocky was well aware of Lilia's doubt. He hadn't explained in detail before because even he wasn't sure if his ideas would work, but now he could share his thoughts since he had completed the most crucial step. So Rocky went on to say, "I was in a hurry to enhance the void magic armor, because only in this way can we make money to buy food." "Making money from enhancing the void magic armor? How do you plan to make money?" Lilia was even more confused by Rocky's explanation. "I plan to hunt demons." Looking at Lilia, Rocky revealed his long-held idea. What did you say?" Rocky's words had stunned Lilia, and a moment later, having regained her senses, she rushed to Rocky's front. "No, Rocky, you mustn't think like this. Don't consider targeting the demons." Rocky had anticipated Lilia's reaction, so he just sighed helplessly and looked back at her with a question. "Other than targeting the demons, do we have any other choice?" His counter-question was filled with helplessness, but left Lilia speechless. As Lilia had said earlier, Thunderhawk City was facing a significant crisis. Winter was approaching, and the city lacked the food reserves for the cold months. The Azure Commerce Guild had also chosen this time to hike up the trade prices, leaving Thunderhawk City unable to afford enough food. How would they overcome this difficulty? This was the dilemma that had troubled everyone for the past month. Lilia was worried, Aileen was anxious, but no one was as desperate as Rocky, for Thunderhawk City was his. He was the city lord. If something went wrong with the city, as the city lord, wouldn't Rocky be doomed too? Therefore, he was actually the most anxious of all. So while Rocky would spend each day in his laboratory tinkering with runes at night, when everyone else in the city had fallen into a deep sleep, he would think about how to get Thunderhawk City through the winter, how to ensure the city's residents had food to eat. Ultimately, he thought of a method: hunting demons. After so long familiarizing himself with this world, Rocky knew very well that demons were not just everyone's enemies, but also a resource. Demons were valuable. n/o/vel/b/gen.c//om. Ever since demons began to invade the land, people discovered that these creatures from the different dimension, despite being terrifying, were treasures all over. Their skin, as hard as steel, yet as flexible as cloth, was the perfect material for making soft armor. The blood of demons was a prime magical ingredient, even capable of enhancing magic stones. The most valuable part of a demon was the demon core, equivalent to the heart of a demon, containing energy far surpassing that of any magic stone, a very precious item that many were researching to uncover the secrets of the demon core and locate the demon's weakness. In short, a demon's body was full of treasures. Therefore, whether it was the governments represented by the various sky cities or individuals aiming to make money, many were hunting demons all year round, and it had even led to the emergence of a new profession, demon hunter. And the method Rocky thought of was to hunt demons. If he could successfully kill a demon, he could easily earn close to 10,000 gold coins. This price was not exaggerated at all, for although demons were everywhere, unless a formal military force was deployed for a large-scale hunt, killing a demon with an individual's power was very difficult, hence the high price. This was why Rocky was heading Thunderhawk City towards Eternal City. It was the largest trade city in the skies. With demons in hand, once he reached Eternal City, he would not have to worry about being unable to sell them, nor fetching a high price. At the same time, this was also why he had been relentlessly strengthening his void magic armor day and night. To hunt demons, he would have to act personally, as only the void magic armor could contend with demons. However, Rocky knew his abilities were too mediocre and his void magic armor too outdated. Thus, it was essential to enhance it with runes to have a chance at success. And now, having completed the enhancement of the void magic armor, his next plan was to return to land, hunt demons, and then sell them. Thus, naturally, Thunderhawk City would overcome its crisis. In Rocky's view, this was the only way to save Thunderhawk City. No, you absolutely cannot go. However, Lilia firmly disagreed with his idea. Rocky, last time you already witnessed how terrifying demons are. They are monstrous creatures that only an army can contend with, not something you can handle alone. At this moment, Lilia showed an unprecedented level of agitation because, in her view, Rocky's idea was simply suicidal. She could rely on Rocky, could support him unconditionally, but she would never watch him go to his death. This was Lilia's bottom line, so she firmly opposed Rocky's method. Lilia, this is the only way to save Thunderhawk City. Even if this city is destroyed, I want you to live. Standing in front of Rocky, staring intently into his eyes, Lilia resolutely said. Her words stunned Rocky. He looked at Lilia's eyes with some disbelief, seeing only determination in her eyes, which let Rocky know that Lilia wasn't deceiving him. She would rather see Thunderhawk City fall than let him get hurt. So, Rocky smiled and placed his hands on Lilia's shoulders. Then he said, Thunderhawk City won't be destroyed, and I won't die, because I didn't plan to hunt demons alone. So why are you in such a hurry? You don't need to lie to me. Lilia glared at Rocky, dismissing his words. Don't forget that I'm the captain of the guard in Thunderhawk City. None of the city's guards and skyships can help you in this matter. They are no match for demons. I didn't say I wanted their help. Shaking his head at Lilia, Rocky became serious. I want you to come with me, the two of us together, to hunt demons. Me? Upon hearing this, Lilia was stunned. She stared blankly at Rocky for a long while before letting out a bitter smile. Sorry, I cannot help you this time. I am too weak. Looking at Rocky, Lilia's voice was filled with bitterness. Unless I reach the strength of a 5th-level warrior, I wouldn't even withstand a single blow from even the weakest demon. But I'm only a 3rd level. This strength is not even enough to buy you some time in case of a demon encounter. I'm sorry." As she spoke these words, Lilia felt extremely distressed. She indeed wanted to help Rocky, but as she had said, even to face the weakest demon, one would need the strength of a 5th-level warrior. This was experience that far too many had paid for with their lives, yet she was only 3rd level. "No, you can, and only you can." However, just as she had finished speaking, Rocky shook his head and then smilingly reminded her, "Lilia, have you forgotten what I found at the Research Institute? It wasn't just research notes and a few magic stones I found, but also several pieces of rune equipment. Those rune equipments are all personally crafted by Windsor. And as long as you were the rune equipment, together, we can definitely hunt down the demons." Rocky indeed wanted to earn money by hunting demons, but he never thought of completing this task alone, because he knew he couldn't do it. Even if his void magic armor was successfully enhanced, he still couldn't do it. So, his initial idea was to team up with Lilia. "Are you saying, let me with the rune equipment left by Wincells?" After hearing Rocky's explanation, Lilia didn't dismiss it immediately, but instead frowned and fell into thought. She had figured out that Rocky had made thorough preparations for this plan. Not only had he made arrangements for Thunderhawk City, but he had even taken helping her into consideration, which was very comprehensive. But would his preparations be useful? If she wore the rune equipment left by Wincell, could she really fight the demons? At this thought, Lilia glanced at Rocky and then asked, "Rocky, how powerful is the equipment left by Wincell? Tell me the truth. Each piece of rune equipment is at least as strong as my void magic armor." Rocky quickly provided the answer to this question and didn't exaggerate at all. The equipment he found from the Research Institute was indeed very powerful. Those items were not ordinary, and they all had runes drawn by Wincell himself on them. This was the most important thing. Wincell was a top master who invented the mana runes. Calling him the ultimate genius of this world was not an exaggeration. Thus, the rune equipment made by his own hands was absolutely no less powerful than the void magic armor, and there was no doubt about that. "I see." This answer made Lilia furrow her brow even tighter. Her facial expression became quite intriguing in an instant, somewhat worried, yet also anticipative, eager to try while simultaneously filled with hesitation, clearly caught in a dilemma. Indeed, Lilia was conflicted because if Rocky hadn't exaggerated, then relying on the rune equipment left by Wincell, she too started feeling eager to try hunting the demons. But she was also worried about Rocky's reassurance. After all, equipment was just external aid, and hunting demons was like dancing on the edge of a knife. Any slight mistake could mean death, so Lilia was somewhat hesitant. "Lilia, it's settled then. You and I will hunt demons together." "Well, what? I have it." Just as Lilia was indecisive, Rocky had already made the decision for her. "Lilia, I trust you. As long as you're by my side, I'm sure nothing will happen to me." After saying this, Rocky leapt into the sky and flew towards the city lord's mansion. "Rocky, what are you doing?" "I'm going to get your equipment. You're going to train me right away. We don't have much time." Just as Lilia thought, Rocky had indeed made thorough preparations for hunting the demons. Not only had he enhanced his void magic armor, but he also planned to have Lilia train him. NOVELB //JNN. Hunting demons was very dangerous. Rocky knew this better than anyone. He obviously didn't want to die doing this, so apart from the external preparations, he also hoped to improve himself. Although time was pressing, even a slight improvement before heading out could increase the success rate, and he did not intend to give up even this small chance of success. So once he had successfully persuaded Lilia, he immediately started sparring with her, and this time it was a real sparring session. After that, Lilia began a week-long, intensive training for Rocky. During this week, Rocky never went back to the research lab because a week's time wasn't long. It was actually very short. If he wanted to improve during such a short time, he needed to devote all his energy to training without any distractions. Lilia was naturally very pleased with his actions, and to ensure Rocky could see results in such a short time, she became quite tough on him, sparing no mercy, truly putting him through a hellish training. Time passed day by day, and the week was over in the blink of an eye. That day, Thunderhawk City, gradually hovering in the sky, slowed to a stop, and the entire city floated high in the air. City Lord, you must be careful. At this moment, within the skyport of Thunderhawk City, a skyship had already prepared for takeoff, and both Rocky and Lilia were also ready to board. Seeing the two fully prepared, Eileen, who had come to see them off, could think of nothing else to say but to remind them to be careful. She had only learned a few days ago about their plans, and when she heard Rocky's intentions, she was genuinely frightened and instinctively wanted to stop them, but it was to no avail. The only thing Eileen could do was to take good care of Thunderhawk City while Rocky was away. We will be fine. With a laugh towards Eileen, Rocky appeared quite relaxed. The city is in your hands now. Remember to keep the guards and the skyships on standby. The moment you see the signal, come to pick us up immediately. All right, since the mission involved hunting demons, it would be impractical to take all 10 skyships of the city, as that would be too conspicuous and might attract a multitude of demons. Therefore, this time Rocky sent only one skyship, and upon landing with Lilia, they would send the skyship back and signal Eileen when they wanted to return to the city. Upon seeing the signal, Eileen would dispatch a skyship to pick them up. This arrangement was so bold that even Eileen could hardly believe it, for it meant that Rocky was entrusting his life into her hands. Why would Rocky trust her so much? That question, even Eileen herself did not know. All she knew was that when Rocky informed her, she felt disbelief as well as a touch of emotion. We are leaving now. Make sure to watch for the signal. As Eileen reminisced about the scenes from a few days ago, Rocky and Lilia had already boarded the skyship. They waved at her before the skyship gradually ascended and quickly flew towards the land. Felly, keep all the skyships ready for takeoff, and keep an eye out for the City Lord's signal. As the skyship gradually disappeared into the clouds, Eileen turned to a guard standing nearby and instructed. This guard was none other than Felly, who had initially welcomed Rocky at the skyport. He had since been promoted by Lilia to one of the deputy captains of the Guard Corps, specifically in charge of managing the skyships at the skyport. Yes. With a response, Felly saluted Eileen militarily and then went to make preparations with his team. Leaving the people on standby in Thunderhawk City aside for now, Rocky, who was en route to the land on the skyship, was already seated in the cabin, seemingly resting with his eyes closed. This was his second return to the land, and he found it quite amusing, as his memories recalled that the former him had never set foot on land in his entire life. Yet now, he had made repeated trips to the land within just a month or two, the frequency of which was indeed a bit too rapid. Having recently been to the land, Rocky felt less excitement this time and no longer stood at the bow, facing the wind like last time. Instead, he sat quietly in the cabin. Once we reach the land, follow my lead. You must not act on your own. As Rocky inwardly mused whether his return to the land was overly frequent, Lilia was cautioning him. By now, Lilia had donned a new set of equipment, specifically the rune equipment left by Wenzel. Not only were these pieces exquisite, but they also featured patterns composed of runes, making Lilia look completely renewed. Even though she was equipped with more powerful gear, Lilia remained cautious and continued to remind Rocky that he must not act independently once they reached their destination. Among the two, only she had encountered real demons. Rocky's knowledge of demons was still only theoretical, so they had agreed beforehand that Lilia would take the lead once they got to the land. Okay. Rocky gave Lilia a serious look and nodded without jest. The journey back to the land from Sky City didn't take long. After staying in the cabin for a few hours, Rocky felt the skyship's speed slow down, which clearly meant they were nearing the land. So he and Lilia left the cabin together and stood at the bow looking down, just in time to see another vast forest below them. Lucky us, another forest. Discovering their landing spot was a forest made Lilia sigh with relief, for the terrain was ideal for their operation. Escaping danger would be easier in the woods than if they had landed in a large plain or desert, where they wouldn't have a place to hide. Steer the ship to the edge of the forest. Then we can land. Lilia turned to the guard accompanying them, and issued an instruction before turning to look at Rocky, only to find him unusually quiet and solemn. "What's the matter? You nervous?" Seeing Rocky acting differently from before, Lilia asked with a smile. "Yeah, a bit nervous." Glancing at her, Rocky couldn't help but take a deep breath and nodded. He hadn't felt the slightest bit nervous when imagining all this before, nor when he was in the cabin, but now, as the skyship was about to land, he couldn't help feeling tense. It's normal to be nervous. After all, demon hunting is no game. One careless move, and we both might not make it back. But you don't seem to be nervous. Looking at Lilia, Rocky couldn't help but admire her, as he couldn't sense any nervousness coming from her. "Between the two of us, you handle the nerves, I'll handle the calm." Curving her lips into a smile, Lilia cracked a rare joke. The joke finally drew a smile from Rocky, but he knew in his heart that Lilia's extensive experience allowed her to be calm and composed at critical moments, a skill he completely lacked. He still had much to learn. "We're about to land?" Just then, Lilia's voice brought him back to the present, and he saw the skyship hovering at the edge of the forest, making its descent. Soon after, the skyship settled steadily onto a grassland on the forest's outskirts. Rocky and Lilia disembarked and headed straight for the forest. As they ventured further away, the skyship slowly ascended and flew back to Thunderhawk City. "Now we're truly on our own." As he walked toward the forest with Lilia, Rocky looked back just in time to see the skyship climb slowly, muttering to himself. Although this had been his own decision, the reality of being left on land made Rocky feel uneasy, or perhaps scared. "What do you mean on our own? You still have me?" Lilia rolled her eyes at him and said, "Stop fretting. Let's get into the forest. We need to find the demons before they find us. Otherwise, we'll be at a disadvantage." After saying that, she quickened her pace, and after taking a deep breath, Rocky followed closely. It wasn't long before the two of them vanished into the woods. This forest was different from the one Rocky had visited last time. The vegetation here was sparse, and the trees were not lush, making it hard to feel a sense of verdancy. Instead, the whole forest exuded an aura as if it were on the verge of decay. And when Rocky and Lilia truly entered the forest, they gradually slowed down and became more cautious. "Do you remember what I told you?" Lilia, leading the way, casually chopped off a branch blocking their path with her sword without looking back at Rocky. "I remember, if we encounter a high-level demon, we run as fast as we can." That's right. In this world, demons were ranked in tiers with a great variety of species. The strength gap between different types and levels of demons could be tremendous. The strongest were, naturally, the high-level demons. Regardless of species, high-level demons were formidable. Warriors and mages stood no chance against them. Only a great warrior or an archmage, especially when equipped with void magic armor, could fight a high-level demon. Otherwise, it meant certain death. In comparison, low-level demons were much weaker, though their danger depended on the species. Some species might be classified as low-level, but their strength was still formidable, making them equally perilous entities. Over the past several days, Lilia had told Rocky much about the types of demons and the hierarchy of their levels, so he could be prepared and clear about their target for this mission. So, while Lilia didn't look back as she led the way, she continued, "Our target this time is low-level demons. The lower the better. Hence, if we run into high-level demons or more than 2 low-level demons, we'll run immediately." "Got it. We probably won't be that unlucky to run into high-level demons right off the bat." Though Lilia's words were true, Rocky felt it wouldn't be so unfortunate for them to encounter high-level demons right away. They weren't as common as cabbages on the roadside. Surely they wouldn't stumble upon one so soon? He had just finished speaking when suddenly a roar came from a distance, and at the same time, the ground beneath him and Lilia began to tremble continuously. n/o/b//gen.c//om. This is Jinx. This sudden but ear-splitting roar, along with the trembling of the ground, undoubtedly signified great danger. So after giving Rocky a fierce glare, Lilia immediately dragged him behind a large tree for cover. In fact, both of them could tell that the roar did not come from the forest they were in. Rather, it came from a very distant place, which only made it more evident how terrifying the source of that roar was. Lilia was afraid that the roar would disturb the demons in the forest, and naturally, they had to hide just in case. And if just a single roar could affect such a vast distance, one could imagine that the demon emitting the roar must be a high-level demon. They waited until the roar had completely subsided before Lilia and Rocky emerged from behind the tree where they had been hiding and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Lilia, what exactly happened just now? Turning his head towards the direction from which the roar came, Rocky couldn't help but ask. It's likely that someone provoked a high-level demon. The two sides must be fighting. Just like Rocky, Lilia also turned to glance in that direction, but her answer was not certain. Could there be others like us, hunting demons as well? I don't know. Shaking her head, Lilia sighed. We're better off minding our own business. Even if the others are hunting demons, their target is a high-level demon. Do you really want to encounter such a person? Rocky opened his mouth, but ultimately said nothing. Those who targeted high-level demons. What kind of beings were they? Indeed, it was best to avoid provoking them, better yet, not to meet them at all. Let's not worry about this anymore. Withdrawing her gaze, Lilia stepped forward to continue their progress. Stay alert. If there are demons in this forest, they surely have been disturbed by that roar. We need to be cautious. All right. Agreeing, Rocky followed Lilia, his alertness heightened. The two of them cautiously made their way deeper into the forest, walking and stopping intermittently, always ready to halt at the slightest rustle of leaves or grass, prepared for combat. But despite their caution, they still hadn't encountered any demons, a fact even Rocky found unusual. So, as night fell and Lilia decided they should stop to spend the night in the forest, Rocky couldn't help but ask, Lilia, what exactly is going on? Where have all the demons gone? Sitting by the flickering campfire, looking at Lilia who sat opposite him, Rocky was somewhat agitated. It was beyond him how they had traveled the entire day without encountering a single demon. The phenomenon was just too abnormal. There's an old saying, abnormal occurrences often spell trouble. This was clearly not a good sign. Something isn't right. Even Rocky had noticed something amiss. So how could Lilia, with her more extensive experience, not realize there was a problem? But she was also at a loss to understand what was happening. Initially, Lilia's biggest concern was that the two of them would face a swarm of demons or even bump into a high-level demon, leaving them no chance to escape. Yet, after traveling through the forest for a whole day, they hadn't met any demons at all. Could it be that, by some coincidence, there were no demons in this forest? This possibility was quickly dismissed. The land had been occupied by demons for over a century. They were everywhere. How could there be no demons in this particular forest? However, no matter the reason, Lilia couldn't figure it out. She could only be certain of one thing. There was definitely a problem. Maybe something happened that we're unaware of. Anyway, be extra vigilant tonight. It should be fine. After thinking for a long time without reaching any conclusion, Lilia gave up and then started to discuss the night watch with Rocky. They hadn't encountered any demons during the day, but that did not mean they would not encounter any at night. So someone had to keep watch. But just at that moment, while Lilia was getting ready to rest and Rocky was bracing himself for the night vigil, a furious roar suddenly erupted from within the forest. This roar startled them both because they could tell that this time the call wasn't from a distance. It originated from within the forest, and it was very close to them. Finally, the demons had come. They're finally here. Hearing the roar from the forest, Rocky immediately stood up, tense yet also faintly excited. He had finally encountered a demon. This time he had come to hunt demons. And if he had to return empty-handed because he was defeated, that could be forgiven. But if he had to go back because he hadn't encountered any demons, it would drive him mad with frustration. However, in today's world, not coming across demons was almost impossible. Even if none were found during the daytime, there were always encounters at night. Lilia, who had just lain down, also stood up at this moment. She looked in the direction of the roar and listened carefully before saying to Rocky, "Not far from us, let's go." After saying this, The two rushed toward the direction of the roaring noise. Remember, if there's any danger, you run first. Though they were speeding through the forest, Lilia did not forget to remind Rocky to flee if danger arose. Rocky, who was closely following her, nodded at her words, though it was unclear if he agreed. Afterward, the two advanced quickly through the forest, one after the other. Lilia was known for her agility, which allowed her to move freely through the forest, and Rocky, relying on the enhancement provided by his void magic armor, moved with ease as well. In such a manner, they soon traversed hundreds of meters into the forest as if walking on flat ground. At the same time, the demon's roars continued unabated, serving as invisible coordinates, continuously reminding Rocky and Lilia that they were getting closer and closer to their target. Stop! Once they heard the demon's roar again, Lilia suddenly halted, realizing from the sound that they were very close to the demon. It was not wise to continue sprinting at this point, as it could lead to running straight into the demon's embrace. Seeing her stop, Rocky, who had always been following her, also halted and then drew the side sword from his void magic armor, readying himself for battle. The demon is in that direction, go! Using her experience, Lilia quickly identified a direction and, after informing Rocky, briskly headed that way. However, just as they were about to search for the demon, having barely taken a step, a loud noise suddenly erupted from the distant forest, followed instantly by a black shadow shooting out like a cannonball. Had they been discovered? n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Seeing a black shadow fly out from the forest, both Lilia and Rocky were startled, their first thought being that the demon had spotted them. But a moment later, they realized that this was not the case. The black shadow that flew out from afar crashed into a large tree while still a good distance from them and let out a miserable scream as it hit the ground. Not a demon? This unexpected outcome left Rocky stunned. When he took a closer look at the shadow, he found that it wasn't a demon at all, but a person. No, that was not quite accurate. To be precise, the shadow was a beast man, a towering beast man, more than 2 meters tall. What was happening? The scene before him confused Rocky. He had expected a demon to rush out, but instead, it was a beast man, and judging by the way the beast man had landed, he seemed to have been sent flying? Don't just stand there like an idiot. While Rocky was dazed, Lilia reacted swiftly and pulled him behind a huge rock to take cover. Just as they had hidden, the demon's roar sounded again, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. Bang! 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 The heavy footsteps grew closer and soon caused the ground beneath Rocky to tremble, indicating something was approaching. The severe shaking of the ground made Rocky, hiding behind the rock, unable to resist peering out to take a look. Soon enough, he saw the distant forest ambiguously reveal a massive figure. The sheer size of the figure was astoundingly large by any measure, and with each step, the earth trembled along. And while its strides didn't seem swift, it had covered the distance in merely a few paces. My God, what on earth is that thing? As he watched the enormous figure step out of the shadows, Rocky's eyes grew wider and his face gradually paled, because in his view, the creature that emerged from the forest was unmistakably a monster. This monster stood over 3 meters tall, resembling a humanoid rock. Every inch of it was made of stone, and its massive stone fists were as big as its head. The only things relatively normal about it were its eyes. However, in comparison to its huge stature, its eyes were as small as soybeans, just 2 little dots on its enormous head. What was this thing? Demons? While Rocky was utterly dumbfounded by the monster before him, Lilia inhaled sharply next to him, for while Rocky didn't know what the monster was, Lilia did. It was the demon they were hunting. It's the Grey Rock demon. Damn it! After one glance at the demon, Lilia clenched her teeth fiercely. Hearing this, Rocky quickly retreated and asked softly, "Is that a demon? You recognize it?" Lilia nodded, a worried look crossing her face. "Is it a high-level demon?" Rocky certainly noticed Lilia's concern and quickly pressed for answers. They couldn't really be so unlucky as to encounter a high-level demon right away, could they? Fortunately, Lilia shook her head after a moment, indicating they weren't that unlucky. But after shaking her head, Lilia followed up saying, this type of demon is called the Grey Rock Demon. Although it's a low-level demon, it's very tough to handle. Grey Rock demons have no flesh and blood. They are entirely composed of stone. This thing is extremely strong, and its body is harder than diamond. Not even a magic cannon can shatter it, which makes it really tough to deal with. Lilia was absolutely right. At that moment, what they had encountered was indeed a Grey Rock demon, whose biggest characteristic was its toughness. So tough that even standing still and taking a direct hit from a magic cannon didn't bother it. However, the value of a Grey Rock demon was also extremely high. Despite lacking flesh, once killed, a Grey Rock demon's body would disintegrate into Grey Rock stone chunks. Once refined, these chunks could be turned into incredibly sturdy Grey Rock steel, making it one of the most top-notch materials, more valuable than an equivalent amount of gold. In just a few words, Lilia explained the situation regarding the Grey Rock demon to Rocky, leaving it unclear whether they were unlucky or fortunate to have encountered such a difficult yet valuable Grey Rock demon. I see. So, what do we do now? Do we take action? After understanding the basics about the Grey Rock demon, Rocky asked, wait a moment, let's see how things unfold first. Lilia waved her hand and was not ready to act immediately, instead peering out to observe. At this time, the Grey Rock demon once again took a step, but its heavy footsteps were not heading towards Rocky and Lilia. Instead, it was heading towards the Beast Man, who had previously crashed into the ground with a thud. Meanwhile, the Beast Man also got up. The Beast Man stood there bare-chested, his muscles sculpted and well-defined, and he wielded a broadaxe in his hand. He showed no fear in the face of the approaching Grey Rock demon. In fact, he even thumped his chest, full of fighting spirit. Who is this guy? Hiding behind a rock, Rocky glanced at the Grey Rock demon and then at the Beast Man, utterly confused. He still hadn't figured out what was going on. However, Lilia next to him quickly provided an answer. After looking at the Beast Man, she turned to Rocky and said, this Beast Man, just like us, is here to hunt demons. He's a demon hunter. This Beast Man is a demon hunter? Lilia's words made Rocky gasp sharply, and he hurriedly leaned forward to look at the Beast Man. In his gaze, the bare-chested Beast Man was confronting a Grey Rock demon. Although the Grey Rock demon had a gigantic body, the Beast Man was also a hulking figure, standing well over 2 meters tall with muscles that seemed sculpted by axes and cleavers. Just this impressive appearance alone made him no less formidable than the Grey Rock demon. What was even more crucial was the strong fighting spirit exhibited by the Beast Man. He had clearly been thrown here, but when he got up from the ground, he showed no fear facing the advancing Grey Rock demon. Was this the demon hunter? It had been said before that because demons were of great value, this had given rise to the profession of demon hunter, those who hunted demons specifically to sell them and thereby sustain their livelihood. Generally speaking, demon hunters were extremely wealthy, given the immense value of demons. A demon hunter, if he hunted just one demon a year, could earn enough to live comfortably without worries for the entire year. But equally, while this profession was lucrative, it also had a high mortality rate. After all, the targets they hunted were terrifying, leading to a frequent reversal of roles between hunter and hunted, to the extent that the vast majority of demon hunters ultimately died during their hunts, turning into the quarry of the demons. Yet even so, there were still a great number of people who pursued this profession. After all, demons were valuable, and among the demon hunters, there were indeed skilled individuals. Some even made a name for themselves and became significant figures that shook the entire sky. Rocky had not expected that his first demon hunt would bring him face to face with a demon hunter. He couldn't tell if this was bad luck or good fortune. They're fighting. Just as Rocky was inwardly reflecting, the Beast Man and the Grey Rock demon had already started clashing fiercely. The first to make a move was not the Grey Rock demon, but the Beast Man. The Beast Man let out a furious roar and charged towards the Grey Rock demon, his entire form like a moving mountain. Moments later, he slammed ferociously into the Grey Rock Demon's chest, forcing the massive opponent to stumble back several steps. And that was not the end. As the Grey Rock Demon staggered back from the powerful impact, the Beast Man leaped up, hoisted the broadaxe in his hands, and chopped down fiercely. A sound rang out as the broadaxe struck squarely on the Grey Rock Demon's head, but it produced a metallic clashing noise, and then nothing further happened. The Grey Rock Demon was unharmed. Seeing this scene, Rocky finally understood what Lilia had said earlier. The Grey Rock Demon's body was exceedingly tough, impervious to ordinary weapons. After being struck by the axe, the Grey Rock Demon was clearly enraged, and a crack then opened on its stone-like head, soon followed by roars emanating from the crack. Amid the roars, the Grey Rock Demon raised its huge fist and slammed it down hard at the Beast Man. N/O/vel/B//in.C//om. Bring it on! Faced with the descending fist, not only did the Beast Man not dodge, but he also let out a shout and then hoisted the broadaxe with both hands as if he were holding up the fiery sky, attempting to block the strike outright. A moment later, a dull thud sounded. The Grey Rock Demon's fist landed heavily, exactly on the Beastman's broadaxe. And yet he actually blocked it. The Beastman below the fist was gritting his teeth, veins bulging on his arms as he held the Grey Rock Demon's fist at bay with the broadaxe, successfully withstanding the blow. Then, amidst his roaring, the Beastman's arms burst with force, swiftly knocking aside the fist overhead, and as he leaped up, he landed another axe blow on the Grey Rock Demon's head. My goodness! Rocky, hiding behind a rock, was completely stunned by the battle unfolding before him. He had never imagined the Beastman could be so formidable, daring to fight a demon one-on-one, and not falling behind in the least. This was utterly unbelievable. Yet, as shocked as he was, and as much as he admired it, he hadn't forgotten his main task. He too was here to hunt demons. So, Rocky hesitated, unsure of what to do. The Beastman before him was so formidable. Should he just stand by and watch the highly valuable Grey Rock Demon be defeated and let this big catch slip away? Thinking this, Rocky couldn't help but glance at Lilia, then noticed that Lilia's brows were also tightly knit. Lilia, can this Beastman win? Hard to say. Lilia shook her head, her expression serious. This Beastman is very powerful. I estimate he's at least a 5th-level warrior, maybe even 6th, and he has a lot of experience. Did you notice? Each of his attacks specifically targets the Grey Rock Demon's head because that's the only weak spot where the demon core is located. But it's not going to be easy for this Beastman to defeat the Grey Rock Demon. He's already on par with the Grey Rock Demon. How is it not easy? You'll see soon enough. We're not at the critical moment yet. Without further explanation, Lilia continued to watch the battlefield. At this moment, the Beastman was fiercely tangled in a death battle with the Grey Rock Demon, and he was indeed formidable. Facing a Grey Rock Demon that was significantly larger than himself, he did not fall behind at all. In fact, due to his relatively greater agility, he even managed to gain the upper hand at times. This result made Rocky extremely anxious, because at this rate, the Grey Rock Demon might really end up in the Beastman's bag. But just as he was about to lose control, an unexpected situation suddenly arose. The Beastman struck the Grey Rock Demon's head with his broadaxe once again, a move he had repeated countless times without effect. But this time, when the broadaxe fell, something different happened. There was a cracking sound, and a crack finally appeared in the rock-like head of the Grey Rock Demon. According to Lilia, the head was the only weak point of the Grey Rock Demon. So although the Beastman hadn't completely shattered its head, this strike gave him hope that a few more blows might finish the Grey Rock Demon off. But at that moment, the heavily damaged Grey Rock Demon let out a deafening roar and went completely berserk, launching an aggressive attack on the Beastman. In an instant, their positions of advantage were completely reversed. The Beastman, who had been slightly on top, was immediately outmatched after the Grey Rock Demon went mad and soon fell into a significant disadvantage. Facing the fists of the Grey Rock Demon, the Beastman no longer dared to resist head-on and could only dodge awkwardly. At first, he managed to barely evade the attacks, but as time wore on, his greater disadvantage became evident. His stamina was failing. Considering the duration, they had been fighting for quite some time. The prolonged battle caused the beastman's stamina to steadily decline. In contrast, the Greyrock demon remained as strong as ever. So, when the Greyrock demon began its frenzied assault and the intensity of the fight escalated, the beastman gradually couldn't keep up. After dodging several attacks consecutively, the beastman was ultimately and carelessly struck by a punch and knocked down to the ground. With one punch, the beastman was flattened to the ground, and the Greyrock demon then lifted its foot and, roaring furiously, slammed it down, attempting to crush the beastman with one stomp. In that instant, the beastman felt the threat of death and hurriedly rolled to the side before he could get up. Immediately after, there was a loud boom. The Greyrock demon's foot slammed down, and the ground erupted in a cloud of smoke. "Aya!" From within the enveloping smoke came a sudden scream. Hidden behind a rock, Rocky and Lilia quickly looked over. But it was not until the smoke cleared that they saw that one of the beastman's arms was pinned under the foot of the Greyrock demon. Amid the screams, the beastman struggled fiercely to pull his arm free, but to no avail. The Greyrock demon's body was even more massive than his and made entirely of stone, making it unimaginably heavy. While the beastman struggled to escape, the Greyrock demon, instead of lifting its foot, raised its fist high and aimed directly down at the beastman. Boom! A loud crash sounded as the Greyrock demon's fist smashed into the ground, and at the same time, the beastman's screams abruptly stopped. Had he been smashed to death? No longer hearing the beastman's screams, Rocky, hidden behind a rock, felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be that the beastman had just been smashed to death? But no! Just as he thought the beastman had been killed, he suddenly saw a disheveled figure appear not far away. It was the beastman. He was alive, and he had escaped. Seeing the beastman reappear, Rocky was shocked. However, as he looked closely at the beastman, he was stunned. The broadaxe in the beastman's hand was dripping with blood, and his other arm was severed cleanly. In a desperate bid to save his life, the beastman had amputated his own arm that was pinned down, thus narrowly escaping death. That was ruthless. Looking at the still bleeding stump, Rocky felt his face must have turned pale, realizing just how dangerous it was to deal with demons, that life and death could hinge on an instant. "Oh no!" As Rocky was somewhat dazed, Lilia suddenly shouted, snapping him out of his stupor. "Oh no!" Recovering his senses, Rocky silently cursed as the beastman, who had just narrowly escaped death, was charging in their direction, where he and Lilia were hiding. This wasn't to say that the beastman had spotted them, but rather, having lost an arm, he knew he couldn't win and so decided to flee. Coincidentally, the direction of his escape was precisely where Rocky and Lilia were hiding. As he attempted to flee, the berserk Greyrock demon showed no signs of stopping. The frenzied demon not only caught up with the beastman, but also raised its fist and smashed down, forcing the beastman to use every last bit of his strength to barely dodge. Although he dodged, the Greyrock demon's fist smashed directly onto a large rock, the very rock behind which Rocky and Lilia were hiding. As the rock shattered, the two of them sprang out, appearing before the beastman and the Greyrock demon. In an instant, the whole forest fell silent, as neither the beastman nor the Greyrock demon expected others to be present. Similarly, Rocky and Lilia were caught off guard, never having imagined they would expose themselves like this. But as the beastman, Greyrock demon, and Rocky all froze, Lilia was the first to react, and she shouted at Rocky, "Take action! Attack!" While everyone else was stunned, Lilia reacted the fastest. She shouted at Rocky, and then, with shield in hand and longsword gripped tight, she charged directly at the Greyrock demon. Rocky and the beastmen quickly caught up, with the beastman's reaction slightly faster. He didn't get entangled in who Rocky and Lilia were, instead taking the opportunity to dash into the forest, directly running away. As for Rocky, he took to the air and then dove down at the Grey Rock Demon from midair. "I'll hold it off." You look for a chance to attack its head, holding up her shield as she approached the Grey Rock Demon. Lilia shouted while swinging her long sword heavily toward the Grey Rock Demon's lower leg. The Grey Rock Demon stood over 3 meters tall, and even the similarly large beastmen only came up to its chest when facing it, so Lilia, who was even shorter than the beastmen, had no way to compare with such a massive creature. In front of this gigantic monster, Lilia was like a tiny speck. But don't underestimate this small figure, because Lilia was now fully equipped with rune-enhanced gear personally strengthened by Windsail. With the power of this rune equipment, her strength had skyrocketed, already nearing the level of a 5th-level warrior. So when Lilia's sword struck the Grey Rock Demon, a crack followed by scattering of stone shards showed she had actually injured the Grey Rock Demon. This was simply incredible. The rock-solid Grey Rock Demon, so easily hurt? If the Beastman from before had seen this scene, he would have dropped his jaw in shock, for he had fought desperately for a long time, striking the same spot countless times, only to barely make a crack on the Grey Rock Demon's head. Yet Lilia's single strike knocked off several chunks of stone from the body of the Grey Rock Demon. The difference was simply too great. Of course, this did not mean Lilia was stronger than the Beastmen. In actuality, the real difference in absolute strength was still in the Beastman's favor. The real gap was in the equipment. The Beastman's broadaxe couldn't compare with Lilia's full set of rune equipment, especially the long sword in Lilia's hand, which Rocky had found in the Research Institute. Windsail had inscribed several hundred first-level runes on this longsword, that contained mana even surpassing that of the side sword of the Void magic armor. As the saying goes, a fine horse deserves a good saddle. The reason Lilia could injure the Grey Rock Demon with one strike was because her weapon was good enough. At this moment, the Grey Rock Demon, having been struck, was clearly in pain and immediately swung its fist down at Lilia. Opportunity? Seeing the Grey Rock Demon focus on Lilia, Rocky immediately seized this opportunity, quickly flying over the Grey Rock Demon's head from midair and slashing viciously at its head. With a clang, Rocky's longsword landed heavily on the Grey Rock Demon's head, followed by a cracking sound that made the fissure cut by the Beastmen even larger. Rocky was wearing the Void magic armor, and the long sword in his hand was naturally embedded with magic stones and inscribed with many runes, so its power was immense. Moreover, the Grey Rock Demon's head had already been attacked countless times by the Beastmen and had shown weaknesses, so Rocky's sword strike immediately had an effect. At this moment, the Grey Rock Demon clearly had suffered a heavy blow, its huge form even swaying and nearly losing its balance. But similarly, the heavily injured Grey Rock Demon became even more furious after regaining its footing. You could see it roaring in anger as it raised both arms and then tried to crush Rocky on its head with a powerful blow. In such a situation, even Rocky, who wanted to follow up with a second strike, couldn't react in time and hurriedly flew higher instead. Just as he flew out of the reach of the Grey Rock Demon's attack, a muffled thud sounded as the demon's raised arms slapped together with such force that it even cracked its palms. Seeing this, Rocky broke out in a cold sweat and felt thankful he hadn't been rash in seeking quick success, for if such a heavy blow had hit him, he would have been heavily injured, if not dead. Seeing Rocky escape its attack range, the Grey Rock Demon on the ground roared at him nonstop, madly waving its arms to hit him out of the air, but to no avail. However, suddenly during its wild arms swinging, the Grey Rock Demon tilted and its huge body fell down without warning. It turned out that while Rocky had drawn the Grey Rock Demon's attention, Lilia took the opportunity to circle behind it, and, seizing the moment, slashed at the Grey Rock Demon's knee with all her strength. Adding the inherent power of her longsword, she managed to make the Grey Rock Demon lose its balance and half kneel to the ground. At the same time, Rocky in the air dove down again, striking the Grey Rock Demon's head once more. In this way, Rocky and Lilia, one in the air and the other on the ground, began to engage with the Grey Rock Demon. Although Rocky and Lilia had less absolute strength compared to the Beastmen, one was wearing rune-enhanced void magic armor and the other rune equipment. With their tacit cooperation, Their combined strength resulted in a qualitative change, leaving the enraged Grey Rock demon no chance against them. Facing the agile Lilia and the freely flying Rocky, the Grey Rock demon was played like a puppet. Each time it targeted one of them, the other would launch a stealth attack, and with both of their weapons so powerful, the duet gradually left the Grey Rock demon battered and bruised. What's more important, during these repeated attacks, the Grey Rock demon's head became the main target, enduring countless hits. Die! When the Grey Rock demon was once again lured by Lilia, Rocky charged above its head and brought down another sword strike, directly severing half of its brain, even exposing the demon core within. Finally, they saw results. Seeing his strike sever half of the demon's brain and expose the demon core, Rocky was overjoyed. It meant they were about to succeed. If the next strike could hit the demon core, it would be enough to completely annihilate the monster before them. But just as Rocky basked in his triumph, the Grey Rock demon went completely berserk. The threat of death made the monster let out an ear-shattering roar, and it suddenly changed direction, charging into the forest. This was trying to flee? The actions of the Grey Rock demon left both Rocky and Lilia stunned. They never expected the monster to know how to flee. However, they quickly realized their mistake, for demons do not flee, and that was what made them most terrifying. The crazed Grey Rock demon wasn't running away, but instead made it to a large tree. It hugged the tree trunk, yanking the great tree from its roots, then swung it like a broom toward Lilia. Faced with the sweeping tree, Lilia had nowhere to escape despite her agility. All she could do was shield herself with a shield before the tree trunk struck her fiercely, sending her flying. Seeing Lilia sent flying, Rocky, who was in midair, panicked. But he was the next to suffer, as the Grey Rock demon, after sweeping Lilia away, raised the tree and took aim at him. Damn it! Rocky, who initially was about to dive down to rescue Lilia, had to halt his descent and, with a nimble sidestep, circled in the air, narrowly avoiding the attack. Use magic. N/O/vel/b//n.c//om. Just then, Lilia's voice called out from below. Although she had been struck head-on, the protection of her rune equipment and the timely use of her shield meant her injuries weren't severe. She even had the strength to remind Rocky. Rocky immediately took her advice and began to fly around the Grey Rock demon. With his palm opened, he shot out a series of magic bullets. The sounds of boom, boom, boom followed as a barrage of magic bullets rained down from the sky. However, due to the high-speed flight, the hit rate of the magic bullets wasn't high. Only a small portion hit the Grey Rock demon, with the vast majority missing. Even the hits did not do much damage, for Rocky, empowered by the void magic armor, only reached the level of a third-level mage. His magic bullets were too weak to harm the Grey Rock demon. Yet the unstruck magic bullets had a noticeable effect as they kicked up dust upon impacting the ground, quickly enveloping the battlefield in smoke, with the Grey Rock demon, Rocky, and Lilia all lost within it. This was Rocky's true intention. Amid the billows of smoke, the large frame of the Grey Rock demon remained clearly visible, but it was different for Rocky and Lilia. After being engulfed by the smoke, they completely vanished, leaving the Grey Rock demon unable to find them. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, save for the Grey Rock demon's roars and heavy footsteps. No matter how much it bellowed, Rocky and Lilia did not appear. They seemed to have vanished. Roar! 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 Unable to find the pair, the Grey Rock demon's roars grew louder, and it swung the tree in its hands blindly, making several rounds in the surrounding area. As the tree continued to sweep, the smoke gradually cleared, revealing everything that had been covered. Die! But just as the smoke started to clear, Lilia, who had been out of sight for a while, suddenly fell from above the Grey Rock demon, her rune longsword aiming straight for its head. With a clang, Lilia struck. Her sword harshly hit the Grey Rock demon's arm. In a critical moment, the Grey Rock demon dropped the tree and raised its arm to protect its head, successfully fending off the lethal blow. However, at the very moment Lilia's strike was blocked, the Grey Rock demon's head was penetrated. A rune longsword entered through the back of the Grey Rock demon's skull, piercing the demon core within, then emerged through the mouth, which resembled a gap. Dressed in void magic armor, Rocky floated behind the Grey Rock demon and struck it down. Rocky thrust his sword through the demon core of the Grey Rock demon from behind, completely killing the fearsome creature. A thunderous boom echoed as the demon core was pierced, and the Grey Rock demon's colossal body collapsed with a crash, breaking into variably sized rocks, which turned into the Grey Rock stones that Lilia had mentioned before. The hunt, successful. As they witnessed the Grey Rock demon crumble into rubble, Rocky and Lilia exchanged a glance, and smiles spread across their faces simultaneously. They had won! They had truly slain the Grey Rock demon. The tough and perilous battle had exhausted them both. So as soon as the Grey Rock demon hit the ground, they were immediately overwhelmed by an immense fatigue and couldn't help but sit down on the ground to catch their breath. To be honest, even though Rocky had made ample preparations beforehand and had even undertaken an intensive week of training with Lilia, the real encounter with the demon, especially the combat, made him understand the kind of pressure one had to bear in the face of a demon. Therefore, even though the Grey Rock demon had become nothing more than real stones, the memory of the recent fight still left Rocky with lingering palpitations. That was really close just now. Leaning against what had become a boulder, the Grey Rock demon, Rocky couldn't help but express his amazement. Although he and Lilia weren't gravely injured, it didn't mean the battle hadn't been dangerous. In fact, had they not been together, had their equipment not been sufficiently good, or had the Beastmen not fought a vanguard role prior, they might not have won at all. "You did well," said Lilia, seated next to Rocky, as she glanced at him and revealed a knowing smile. Rocky's performance had far exceeded her expectations. It was frankly unexpectedly good, because Lilia knew Rocky best. She knew he hadn't really fought before. At most, he had engaged in some inconsequential training with her. But no matter how much training one does, it could never compare to real combat. Therefore, before this point, including during the battle, Lilia had been worried that Rocky wouldn't be able to endure, not physically, but mentally. Intense and dangerous battles can easily crush the unstable at heart. Yet Rocky had managed, and he had done quite well. "Huh!" Hearing Lilia's praise, Rocky laughed heartily, naturally feeling especially pleased. As they joked and laughed, they alleviated the fatigue from the fight, but they soon got busy with a pressing task. NOVLB //JNN. Though they had slain the Grey Rock demon, one mustn't forget they were still in the midst of the forest, still on land. In this day and age, land was undoubtedly the most dangerous place in the world. So after achieving their objective, they didn't dare to relax and immediately set about collecting the body of the Grey Rock demon, which was the Grey Rock stones scattered about. These Grey Rock stones were their spoils of war, and extremely valuable at that. These seemingly ordinary stones would instantly sell out once put on the market, bringing a steady flow of wealth to Rocky and Thunderhawk City. Under these circumstances, Rocky took out the bags he had prepared beforehand and, together with Lilia, gathered up all the Grey Rock stones, not leaving a single scrap behind. Rocky had done something similar at the Research Institute before, so he was quite experienced. "Lilia, how much do you think these Grey Rock stones will sell for?" asked Rocky as he collected the stones from the ground. "That's hard to say. We'll know when we ask Eileen back home. But as far as I know, Grey Rock steel is one of the best steel materials and it sells by the gram on the market, so we're definitely going to make a good amount of money this time," replied Lilia. "That's great, Rocky felt much relieved by Lilia's words. After all, he had risked his life hunting demons to earn money. But just as he was gleefully stuffing the Grey Rock stones into the large sacks, Lilia suddenly stopped and stood up, clutching her longsword. "Lilia, what's—" After glancing at Lilia, Rocky found her staring intently behind him and quickly turned around, only to see a person standing in the forest behind him. This person had only one arm. It was the Beast Man from before. This guy hasn't run away yet. Surprised to see the Beast Man again, Rocky immediately gripped his side sword. Was this fellow planning to swoop in like a mantis stalking a cicada, with the oriole following, to steal the spoils of battle? It was no wonder Rocky thought this, for strictly speaking, the Greyrock demon was actually the Beastman's prey. Not only had the Beastman discovered it first, but he had also fought with it for a long time, and during this fight, the Beastman had even cracked the Greyrock demon's skull. The relatively easy victory Lilia and Rocky had over the Greyrock demon owed much to the Beastman's efforts. Because of this, it was not impossible for the Beastman to want a share of the spoils, or even to attempt to snatch them by force. And when both Rocky and Lilia had turned their attention to the Beastman, who, despite having lost an arm, still held a broadaxe in his other hand, he also took a step forward, walking toward them. "Stop, don't come any closer." When the Beastman came within a dozen meters of Rocky, Lilia stepped forward to shield Rocky behind her, her long sword pointed directly at the Beastman, ordering him not to come any closer. Lilia knew all too well how strong the Beastman was. Even with a severed arm, he was by no means an easy opponent, so she couldn't allow him to get too close. However, to the surprise of both Rocky and Lilia, the Beastman actually stopped in his tracks. Not only that, he then raised his broadaxe and slowly loosened his grip, letting the broadaxe fall to the ground. In the culture of the Beastman, laying down one's weapon in front of an opponent was equivalent to surrendering. "You too, I mean no harm." After setting down his broadaxe, the Beastman spoke up. His voice was somewhat muffled yet very loud, giving the impression of distant thunder. "If you have something to say, you can say it from there." Lilia, though the Beastman had laid down his weapon, didn't relax her guard one bit. She still gripped her long sword tightly, not allowing the Beastman to come any nearer. The Beastman seemed a little helpless at her intense caution and began to regard Rocky with even greater importance since he could clearly sense that Lilia was protecting him. Not to mention, Rocky's void magic armor made it obvious that he was no ordinary individual. Thus, standing still, the Beastman inquired, "My lord, you are not demon hunters, are you?" "No." Realizing the Beastman was addressing him, Rocky nodded. "My lord, are you from Sky City?" Once the Beastman was certain that he and Rocky were not of the same profession, he seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and followed up with his question. "Yes. What do you want with that?" "My lord, I hope you could take me to Sky City. I need treatment." It was only when the Beastman spoke these words that Rocky remembered the other was severely injured. Despite appearing still majestic, the Beastman's left arm was completely gone, the stump tied roughly with hemp rope to stem the bleeding, and the injury was evidently very severe. This was indeed the real reason why the Beastman had returned. Although he had initially fled, taking advantage of the fight between Rocky, Lilia, and the demon, such a serious injury was beyond him to handle. So after a simple dressing, he was compelled to come back, resulting in the scene before them. And upon hearing his words, before Rocky could even respond, Lilia suddenly turned around and whispered in his ear, "Take him back with us and try to keep him in the city." Upon learning that the Beastmen actually wanted them to take him back to Sky City for treatment of his injuries, Lilia reacted swiftly and immediately whispered to Rocky, "Take him back and try to keep him." The words took Rocky by surprise. Although he was astonished by Lilia's change of attitude, he quickly understood her intention. Was she planning to have him subjugate the Beastman before them? Once he grasped Lilia's intent, Rocky immediately felt it was feasible. Despite the Beastman having lost an arm, which made him appear gravely injured, his inherent strength was unmistakable. Even with one arm missing, his power was not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, in his current state, it was impossible for him to continue as a demon hunter. Slaying demons single-handedly, the Beastman had not reached such a monstrous level of strength. NOV-LB //JNN. But this presented Rocky with an opportunity. If he could retain the Beastman who could no longer hunt demons under his command, it would surely be a significant asset. Whether it was the Beastman's strength or his experience and insight, it would all be of immense help to Rocky. Thinking this, he gave Lilia a slight nod to show that he understood her message, then turned to the Beastman and said, "I can take you to Sky City." Thank you so much." Seeing Rocky's nod of agreement, the beast man appeared very excited, and the nerves he had been straining relaxed, causing his massive body to sway uncontrollably thereafter. His injuries were actually much more severe than they appeared. The reason he had maintained his imposing demeanor was largely due to sheer tenacity. Now that he had relaxed, he was clearly struggling to keep up. "This guy is quite clever." Noticing the beastman's complexion worsen, Rocky naturally understood that his just prior appearance was feigned. This didn't surprise him. After all, neither party knew the other, and it wasn't wrong for the beastman to maintain a strong front, at least to appear capable of fighting. Otherwise, no one could ensure that he wouldn't become another hunting target. This kind of thing was not uncommon on land. "What's your name?" And so, Rocky, Lilia, and the beastman left the forest together, beginning their journey towards the edge of the woodland. As they walked, Rocky asked, "Monty?" The beastman glanced at Rocky, looking past Lilia who was between them, and in a deep, resonant voice, he stated his name. Although the three of them were walking together towards the outskirts of the forest at this time, they still maintained a considerable distance from one another. Lilia and Rocky walked side by side, deliberately keeping the beastman apart from Rocky, clearly still on guard. Lilia didn't see a problem with this caution, although she was keen on having Rocky subdue the beastman. Until they fully understood his background and character, it was prudent to remain guarded. Otherwise, it might be too late if anything went wrong. The beastman also noticed Lilia's thoughts and consciously maintained a fair distance from Rocky. It was fortunate his voice was naturally loud. Otherwise, they might have struggled to hear each other while talking. "My name is Rocky, and this is my guard, Lilia. We are from Thunderhawk City." After Monty introduced himself, Rocky also briefly introduced themselves, and with that, they were acquainted. "How do you plan on returning to Sky City?" "You can use my skyship if you want." Continuing towards the edge of the forest, Monty asked. "No need. Someone will come to pick us up." "You have a skyship?" Lilia declined Monty's offer, but Rocky's face showed surprise and curiosity. He knew that Monty was a demon hunter, but he was unaware that the other man also possessed a skyship. Skyships were not cheap. Most people simply could not afford one. They say demon hunters are wealthy, and it seems to be true. Just a small, worn vessel barely good enough to get by, not worth much. As for Rocky's surprise and curiosity, Monty wasn't taken aback. As a demon hunter, Monty had traveled far and wide, and he could immediately tell that Rocky, although of no ordinary status, was ignorant about many things, such as his current reaction, which showed that he didn't have much understanding of demon hunters. For a true demon hunter like Monty, owning a skyship was not out of the ordinary. In fact, his home was on the skyship. Because of their constant hunting of demons, demon hunters spent more time on land than in Sky City. Furthermore, since Sky City could fly, it could move to different locations after a certain period. Therefore, for demon hunters, a profession that required extended periods on land, it was common to be without a fixed abode and to set up their homes directly on their own skyships. Monty was such a demon hunter who not only had his own skyship but also lived on it with his daughter. Thinking of his daughter waiting for his return, Monty sighed silently to himself. He had never anticipated falling prey to a Grey Rock demon. Although his life was spared, one of his hands had been crippled, which made it impossible for him to continue hunting demons. It seemed he needed to start making plans early. Monty couldn't help but think. Without realizing it, the three of them had walked out of the forest, and at the same time, a hint of dawn had risen at the edge of the sky. Day had broken. Upon exiting the forest, whether it was Lilia, Rocky, or Monty, all three sighed in relief at the same time. Then Lilia took out a signal disc and sent a signal to Thunderhawk City. Monty was startled when he saw the signal disc in Lilia's hands. He recognized the object, and he knew that such a signal disc was not something ordinary people could use. At the same time, he also took out a signal flare, lit it, and held it up to the sky. This was the way ordinary people sent signals. Lilia's method of contacting Sky City directly with a signal disc was a practice reserved for the nobility. Of course, there were more advanced methods, such as using mana to directly transmit sound or images, which were certainly not something the average person could afford. Shortly after the signals were sent, A skyship slowly approached from a distance and began to land after it neared Rocky and his group. This skyship was naturally not from Thunderhawk City, as it was clearly a small civilian skyship, even smaller than the scout ships of Thunderhawk City. It looked somewhat dated, and a young female beast man stood on the prow of the ship. "I'm heading back first. I'll go to Sky City with your skyship later." After greeting Rocky, Monty walked towards his own skyship. Although his figure was still towering, it couldn't help but look somewhat lonely. Watching his figure recede into the distance, Rocky and Lilia almost simultaneously let out sighs. Although Monty hadn't said much along the way, they could hear a hint of helplessness and worry in his few words, especially when they saw the young female beast man standing on the skyship. They understood Monty's feelings even better. "Is that his daughter?" "It looks to be about the right age," Lilia nodded and said helplessly. "That's the life of a demon hunter. These people deal with demons on a regular basis, and few end well. Monty is already lucky to have survived." Rocky didn't know what to say in response to Lilia's words, as this was probably the fate of a demon hunter. These individuals danced on the edge of the knife every day and eventually died by that same blade. "When will our skyship arrive?" For some reason, Rocky suddenly felt the wait was too long. He was eager to return to Thunderhawk City. Perhaps he longed for the City Lord's seat, or maybe he just wanted Monty to receive treatment as soon as possible. He wasn't sure himself. "Don't worry. Aileen has received the signal. We should arrive in another hour or two." Lilia glanced at the signal disc in her hand, which had received a signal from Aileen. This indicated that Aileen inside Sky City had sent a skyship. Hearing this, Rocky nodded, knowing that it was no use being anxious about such matters, and began the long wait with Lilia. In principle, waiting for 2 hours wasn't a very long time, but because they were carrying a lot of gray rock stones, and with Monty's presence, both Rocky and Lilia wanted to return to Thunderhawk City quickly to feel at ease. However, before their skyship arrived, they encountered an unwelcome surprise. The surprise visitors were not demons, but other humans. Just as the 2 hours were almost up, a group of people suddenly flew in from the sky. A Void Magic Squad had suddenly appeared. The so-called Void Magic Squad was a troop composed of Void Magic Armor soldiers, the most elite troops across the skies. The squad that appeared in Rocky and Lilia's view was about 10 strong, each member clad in the latest model of Void Magic Armor. "How do we run into a Void Magic Squad?" Seeing the Void Magic Squad flying overhead, Rocky and Lilia were both stunned, having not expected to encounter such a high-end team. And as they spotted the group, the Void Magic Squad in midair also noticed them, with the leader even halting in place. "This is bad." Seeing the others notice them and halt, both Rocky and Lilia were struck with panic, worrying they might not be able to return this time. When Rocky and Lilia noticed the Void Magic Squad in midair had spotted them, they both inwardly cursed. "Damn it. After all, this is the land." In the current world, there exists an unwritten rule that everyone abides by, which stipulates that everything that happens on land is the work of demons. Killed on land? Definitely the work of demons. Rob on land? Also definitely the work of demons. In short, no matter what happens on land, the culprits are always demons, as this has become a common understanding among the people, because the law can only govern the skies and has long ceased to govern the land. And it's precisely because of this that dangers are omnipresent on land. These dangers do indeed come from demons, but sometimes they do not. So when Rocky and Lilia saw the Void Magic Squad appear and realized they had been noticed, they both had a moment of dread. Not because they feared the squad was after the Grey Rock Stone, but because they feared the squad would discover their secrets. Rocky's current attire, the Void Magic Armor, had been enhanced with runes, while Lilia was dressed in full rune equipment. If the squad were to detect anything off about them, they were as good as dead. In an instant, their hearts leaped into their throats. But thankfully, after a brief pause, the Void Magic Squad in mid-air resumed their flight and soon headed towards the horizon, disappearing from view. Only when the squad had completely vanished from sight did Rocky and Lilia finally breathe a sigh of relief. They hadn't been discovered. That was indeed too lucky. After exchanging glances, Rocky and Lilia saw in each other's faces the look of having survived a great peril, because at that very moment, their tension had even surpassed that of facing demons. In the face of demons, they might have had a chance to flee, but facing that void magic squad moments before, there would have been no opportunity to escape had a fight ensued. The sudden, unexpected encounter came quickly and left just as swiftly. And not long after the void magic squad disappeared, the skyship of Thunderhawk City arrived. 10 skyships slowly emerged above Rocky's head and gradually descended. It's finally over. Seeing the skyships from Thunderhawk City, Rocky finally let out a breath of relief, his mind at ease, but immediately felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His mission this time, though not lengthy, merely a day and a night, had been filled with too many incidents. Not only did he encounter demons, but he also met demon hunters and even a void magic squad right when he was about to return home. The constant surprises had nearly overwhelmed him. Despite the numerous unplanned events, he ultimately achieved his goal and successfully returned to Thunderhawk City, which was a joyous outcome for everyone. Jalwa, what model of void magic armor was that person wearing? While Rocky successfully boarded the skyship and began his return to Thunderhawk City, the void magic squad he had encountered continued to ascend to high altitudes, seemingly on their way back as well. During the ascent, the leader of the squad suddenly asked. This person was clad in a suit of sharp-edged, silvery white armor, obviously not the regular kind of void magic armor, and although his face was obscured by the armor, his voice sounded very young, indicating he was likely not very old. The person he referred to was naturally Rocky, and it was indeed Rocky's void magic armor that he was asking about. Young Master, that's the blood pattern 2nd generation armor from the 1st generation of void magic armor, which has long been phased out. It's normal that you haven't seen it before. Another person flew up beside him and promptly gave an accurate answer. The blood pattern 2nd generation armor, the void magic armor that Rocky was wearing. To tell the truth, even he himself had no idea about it, but it was seen through at a glance by a man named Jalwa. Upon hearing this answer, the young master first fell silent for a while, and then said, "It seems I have not misrecognized it. That indeed is the blood pattern 2nd generation armor, but something seems off to me. Young master, is there a problem?" Jalwa, do you remember what the magic energy value of the blood pattern 2nd generation armor is? Glancing at the person flying beside him, the young master asked again. If I remember correctly, the official data states it at 300 magic energy value. The magic energy value the two were discussing is an important indicator for measuring the combat strength of void magic armor. As is well known, the power source of void magic armor is mana. Therefore, its strength is directly linked to mana, making the magic energy value the best indicator of the merits of a particular void magic armor. And the magic energy value of the blood pattern 2nd generation armor just happened to be 300. Only 300 for the magic energy value. Upon hearing Jalwa's words, the young master clad in silver white armor furrowed his brows and then said with confusion, "But I've just noticed that the void magic armor the man is wearing far exceeds this number in terms of magic energy value." Oh! Upon hearing this, Jalwa was also startled. "Young master, what value did you see?" 500. 500? Young master, that's simply impossible. Laughing with a ha-ha, Jal, who was flying beside the young master, said, "Young master, the magic energy detector must be faulty. The model of the blood pattern 2nd generation armor is too old. The latest magic energy detectors may experience detection issues." "Why would you say that?" Seeing that Jalwa totally disbelieved him, the young master was somewhat puzzled. "Young master, it's not that I don't believe you, but the blood pattern 2nd generation armor simply cannot reach a magic energy value of 500. Jalwa then started explaining to the young master. The blood patterned armor was the 1st generation of void magic armor. Back then, armor had just been invented not long ago, and the technology in all aspects was immature. So the 1st generation of void magic armor not only had generally low magic energy values, but also provided very limited enhancement to the wearer. What's more important is that the blood-patterned armor itself had design flaws. So this series of armor was completely phased out by the 4th generation. But even the blood-patterned 4th generation armor did not exceed a magic energy value of 600. So that man, Even if he modified his armor, couldn't have possibly brought a second-generation armor up to the level of the fourth generation. That is simply impossible. What you're saying does make some sense. Maybe the magic energy detector really is faulty. Zhou's words made the young master nod his head, and then he stopped thinking about Rocky's matter. Not leaving after this, Zhou instead continued to ask, "Young master, what do you think?" "About what?" "The new model of armor. N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. While speaking, Zhou pointed to a few people behind them, or more accurately, at the void magic armor they were wearing. "This batch of new model armor. How do you feel it performs in actual combat, young master?" "Average." After a glance at the few people behind him, the young master casually remarked, "They claim the magic energy value reaches 5,700. But in actual combat, they can't even put out a magic energy value of 4,500. If I hadn't been there this time, they would have all died at the hands of high-level demons." This, seemingly not expecting the young master to rate the new armor so poorly, Zhao felt a bit embarrassed and only spoke after quite a while. "Young master, these are general-purpose armors. They cannot be compared with your special armor. If it doesn't hold up in actual combat, then talking about it is pointless. I will not recommend to the king to purchase this batch of armor."
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500-plus novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.